keep the agenda as mentioned on the website.
We seem to have a photo of Richard and then his name in a different place.
That's
Yes.
his older brother.
Yeah, I
Oh,
intend
okay.
to, no, I intend to vote twice.
It's the only way, Richard. It's the only.
Vote early and vote often.
Right,
As long as one of them is with cause, right?
right.
Oh, these are niceties that, we don't always obey.
So I don't see our, do you see our guests? Let's see.
Oh, goodness, the sun is in my eye.
Hi, Seema. Nice to see you
Okay.
again.
Yes, it is. Seema, how are you doing?
I'm doing much better, thank you. Fully recovered.
A long ordeal.
Oh gosh, yeah. I had COVID. The symptoms went away fairly quickly, except for like fatigue, which lasted a long time.
Yes,
Pain.
glad you're here.
Did you get the COVID brain thing? A friend of mine had the sort of fog.
It definitely during the time when I was really sick, but that went away quickly for me. But my parents, they had the whole loss of sense of taste and smell and all that. So it's been all over even within our family, it's been all over the charts on that.
Yeah.
Have you also been vaccinated?
I got sick 5 days after I got vaccinated.
Oh,
Oh,
Almost. Well, I thought I was in the home stretch, but not quite.
Better late than never. So why don't we get started? Richard, do you think we should get started? I think so.
yeah. Is there anyone else, anyone from the community on?
No, there's a number of people on.
Well, who are the
But I think-
presenters that I should promote?
shouldn't they be, isn't it possible they said they wanted to be part of the Zoom in case they wanted to ask a question, so they should be
Yeah.
able to do that?
So Ethel, I think the way we usually do that is we have the panelists have as panelists the people who are going to make the presentation. And then as the chairs call on people, we can promote them so they can be seen and speak then. But otherwise you'll end up with a Brady Bunch of
Okay,
community.
I mean, whatever you know how to do, but I know that they wanted perhaps to have that opportunity.
Hi, Paige.
Hey, Paige.
Well, we'll continue to do it the way we've been doing it. So
You want to promote Nabila?
Yep, I thought I did, but yeah.
yes, but so
Nabila, are you there?
welcome
Oh, hi.
welcome to the Land Use Committee meeting. The first thing we have is a co-chair's report. I don't know, Richard, we didn't discuss this beforehand, but is there anything to report since the last committee meeting we had? I know we have brief items for new
Yeah.
business, but
I mean, the only thing, there's been some correspondence regarding the crane on 66th Street, which just won't go away.
right, we said
And
we'd bring that up for new business, just so that it,
Okay. Then I
and
have
also
nothing.
the 69th Street. So, all right, so let's move on then to the presentation. Who is giving the presentation from the council member and Community Board 9 and the Borough President? Is it?
Andrew Lassiter. So promote him. Andrew, you're being promoted.
So just for everybody's sake, we have a pretty heavy menu agenda today. So we're going to give, I think it's 20 minutes to the first item, and then 15 minutes to the next item. And then we'll have, like 50 minutes for the third item, which is the rezoning, the zoning text amendment for the MTA, because we really have to discuss that. And our goal is to try to keep the meeting to 2 hours.
May I just ask, is the presentation to take 20 minutes, or is it?
No, the whole
It's
thing.
with the questions, right?
Yes.
That's fine. Okay, so it's a
The
total,
whole topic in 20 minutes.
okay,
Hi,
There's nothing for us to act on tonight. This is
is
just,
that Robert Stern?
It is
Yes.
Robert Stern. Hi, guys. Look, what I saw from the agenda was I was going to present about Morningside Heights Community Coalition, what we did. And then Andrew Lassiter was going to provide details of the zoning study, and we were going to have questions. That was my understanding. Is that okay?
As long as you and Andrew can keep the 10 minutes between you.
We'll do our best.
Thank you. Do you need to share screen?
Yes, I do.
Hang on one second. Okay, that should now be possible.
Okay, guys. Hi, everyone. Should I get started?
Yeah.
All right, thanks very much, everyone. First of all, thanks for having Morningside Heights Community Coalition here and allowing us to present really how this all came about. And then I'll be followed by Andrew Lassiter. So I would suggest that you hold your questions to the end. He's going to be presenting the details of the zoning study. Before I begin, on behalf of the Morningside Heights Community Coalition, I wanted to thank Community Board 9 as co-sponsor of the study, and Barry Weinberg for giving his time and expertise to help develop the study. I also want to thank Community Board 7, your members for participating in the early study iteration discussions and providing your wonderful meeting space. And I want to recognize all the MHCC committee members who gave their time and passion in street tabling, workshops, town halls, reports, petitions, and surveys. Your contributions are highlighted in the study. We showed all work. I especially want to thank our council member, Mark Levine, as a champion for MHCC and rezoning, and his team, particularly his chief of staff, Aya Keefe, along with Eric Quayo, for their consistent involvement in helping move the process forward. Mark and his team arranged many meetings with city planning and the work to gain support from Speaker Corey Johnson, allocate resources to help develop the formal study. And similarly, co-sponsor Gail Brewer and her team have consistently been engaged. Along with Mark Levine, Gail participated at all of our town halls and workshops and continually cheered our efforts. And I know Gail read our memos and reports along the way because she let us know it. I also want to thank our State Assembly member, Danny O'Donnell, for participating at our meetings and as always providing guidance and support, along with our state Senator Brian Benjamin. And finally, thanks to Andrew Lassiter, who you'll be hearing from in a few moments. He's the project leader from the City Council Land Use Division, and to the land use team headed by Raju Mann. Andrew was planner, advisor, guide, liaison, arbitrator, and editor, without whom this study would not have been a feasible and an essential step on the road to rezoning Morningside Heights. So a little bit about us. For those of you who don't know, we were founded in 2016 in response to development without affordable housing in our community. We're an outgrowth of the Morningside Heights Historic District Committee, a lot of the same folks. Here you see Dave Robinson, for example, executive member, getting probably rezoning signatures for a petition we sent ultimately to city planning. Primary mission, promote affordable housing, limit out-of-scale development, preserve the character of Morningside Heights. So when we took all the information from our community through workshops, surveys, subcommittees, interviews, we were trying to capture the aspirations of our neighbors. And what we came away with was they wanted to promote new affordable housing under mandatory inclusionary housing. They wanted to eliminate as of right zoning. We know, of course, that Morningside Heights rezoning is long overdue. The north of us and the south of us, your area, of course, was rezoned. We haven't been rezoned since 1961. We want to sustain hundreds of rent stabilized units. And as you'll see in the planning study, most of those units are in the northern section of Morningside Heights. We wanted to limit tall luxury towers, and importantly, by imposing height caps. We wanted to increase community negotiating leverage. That means we want to say in the kinds of buildings that are developed and the kinds of amenities we can expect. We want to foster greater small business activity. As you know, small businesses have been badly hurt by Amazon, but also, of course, tragically by COVID. And we feel that there are opportunities through commercial rezoning. course, preserve the unique character of Morningside Heights. And we wanted to have a community-led plan, not a plan that was top-down from city planning and developers, but bottom-up with a win-win for city government and the Morningside Heights community. And I think we have that plan. And also, we wanted to create a model, very importantly, for communities to develop their own plans. So what did we do? As an organization, we held workshops, community groups, committee meetings. On a major workshop we held about 150 to 175 people showed up at Corpus Christi Church. We had a facilitator at each table. We had materials about rezoning, about what can be expected from rezoning, what do people want from the community. On the right side, you see a woman looking at an exhibit of what we put out, which was called the Soft Site Report. This was sites that we felt were vulnerable to overdevelopment, but also sites that we felt could be developed properly, perhaps. This was issued in 2016. And as it turns out, a number of the particular development sites that you'll be hearing about later in the zoning study came out of this particular report, including 125th Street and the areas on 110th Street. So what came out of there? Well, people spoke their minds. In a report called Morningside Speaks, people said the following: Morningside needs to preserve a small town environment. Institutional overdevelopment is creating a dead community. We need truly affordable housing. Schools are overcrowded. We need a new school. Apartment rent prices soaring, the middle class is priced out. Rezoning to promote contextual development, limit building heights. Transportation needs upgrades, more buses, more trains, but very importantly, accessibility, elevators for the elderly and disabled. Very important now, as you'll hear later tonight from the Zoning for Transit Accessibility report. I think it's Nabila Malik giving that, who worked with us from city planning, of course. So there are opportunities there to have mandatory easements imposed and elevators installed by the MTA and other transit accessibility amenities. The people felt that their walkability was compromised. And of course, mom and pop stores disappearing, luxury housing raising rents, you know the story. The tax rates go up and landlords impose higher rents or try to displace tenants. And people were very concerned about construction safety as well. They felt that their safety was at risk when they walked past construction sites. And we found that to be very true. Sorry. Let me go back. All right, we'll look at it this way. Sorry, I hit a button that I will. Can you guys see this? Okay. Okay. So we had meetings with Union Theological Seminary and Jewish Theological Seminary. They had both sold land and air rights for over $100 million to developers without any affordable housing promised. And we had meetings with them, imploring them to have affordable housing, and they didn't. And so we not only were upset about that, but also about the construction site safety conditions. So we held a protest in April 2017 at JTS, and you can see signs that said affordable housing now. You can make out Barry Weinberg, Gail Brewer's there. And we also had speakers, Brian Benjamin, Gail Brewer, Danny O'Donnell, and Letitia James, who at the time was public advocate.
Mr. Cohen, forgive me for interrupting.
Sure. Yeah.
This is a preliminary, my understanding of what's happening tonight is that we want to hear people's attitude about the proposal as it affects Board 7. And I think we're less interested in the process by how you got there than we are in what's being proposed. And we have a very full agenda tonight. So I would ask you to skip all the meeting, every meeting you had and stuff like that. Let's get to the meat of what the rezoning proposal is, and in particular as it affects Community Board 7.
Okay, I'll go.
May I add that it would be helpful if we could get to Andrew Lassiter, who's going to present the proposal and explain what that is. And that would be, I think, connected with what you have just said about time and focus.
I mean, we get the general idea that there's been a great deal of thought and planning that's gone into this, and that there seems to be a felt need in the Board 9 community, and that several city officials are also on board. But we'd like to hear specifically what's being proposed and, to some extent, what's being proposed in Board 9, which we don't have much say over, but more importantly, what's being proposed for Board 7.
Very well, then. I'll just zip through to the end slides here. It's very important that you do understand that because it's a community-led plan, it's a community that we all share, not necessarily directed by community borders, which are arbitrary, of course. So when we're talking about the community, we all share the 110th Street site that happens to be just over the border in CB7. So that's why it's very important that you understand the effort that went into a community-led plan. You yourself led community-led plan successfully, and we felt that somehow we could all work together and have your support. I'll just go to this slide here where Corey Johnson came to our meeting and announced that he was offering his support, 100% commitment to developing the zoning study plan that you'll see presented tonight by Andrew Lassiter. So with that, I will turn it over to Andrew, and hopefully we can spend some time with you on understanding what went into this whole thing and why it's so important that people understand the difference between a community-led plan and a top-down plan that has not worked out for many communities. Thanks very much, everyone.
Andrew?
Yes, thank you. So Robert, if you're able to stop sharing your screen, I'll share mine. Great, so just a moment. All right, everybody can see that? Okay.
And I could just ask everybody else if they could put themselves on mute. We seem to be hearing some background noise.
Okay, great. Well, I'll get started. So thanks, Robert, for the introduction. I'm Andrew Lassiter with the City Council Land Use Division. I am joined by my colleague Arthur Huh, also from my team, as well as Lizette Chaparro from the Borough President's Office is here tonight. So yeah, thank you for having us and for coming to hear about this planning study and rezoning framework. So on this slide is a little bit of history. Robert has already hit on a lot of this, so I'll just jump to the fourth part here, which is around 2019, when this group of the City Council Land Use Division, the Borough President, Councilmember Levine, and Community Board 9 decided together to try a different route to a rezoning. And it's a pretty unprecedented one, where stakeholders would be the ones leading and then applying for the rezoning instead of the city or developers. Not the way it's usually done on a neighborhood scale. So we've really been doing our best to support MHCC's work, try to flesh out their ideas into a package that lays out, a clear rezoning rationale. And then the intention here is ultimately to move forward as an application process with DCP. We're not there yet. We haven't started environmental review yet, so we're still kind of in earlier phases. But we put out a planning study a couple of weeks ago. Hopefully you've had a chance to get your hands on it. If you haven't, you can find it on the City Council Land Use Division website. But I'll give you, I know you're short for time tonight, so I'll give you kind of the fast overview of what's in there. And I'll just say, we think this is a solid approach to rezoning, a common sense approach. And now we're at a point where we're looking to spread the word, get the information out into the world, and get continued feedback from the community boards. So I'll go quite quickly through kind of the rationale here, because I think a lot of you probably already understand it from your work on the community board. But just to highlight a few things here, incredible need for affordable housing. CB7 and CB9 have both highlighted this in the recent past. one slice of it kind of here in Community Board 9 is that rents continue to go up faster than the rest of the city. Profits for landlords continue to rise, even as in a lot of the rest of the city, they've dipped a little bit in recent years. And rent stabilized unit turnover is among the highest in the city. And in CB9, again, just to look at a single slice of the issue, incomes in the community board are lower than city averages, but rent burden rates are higher. If we zoom in a little bit to the northern part of Morningside Heights, so you see it circled there on the left, that area has a dense cluster of rent stabilized housing that we feel is crucial to protect. Demographically, that area has a substantially higher percentage of Hispanic, Black, and Asian residents, and a lower percentage of white residents compared to the rest of the neighborhood. The median household income is about half that of the rest of the neighborhood, just in that area. Conversely, if we look at the southern part of Morningside Heights, including the census tracks both north and south of 110th Street, the demographics skew far more white and higher income, much higher median household income. It's more than double that northern area we just looked at. But at the same time, you can see at the bottom of the slide here, rent burden levels are still quite high. Yeah, as Robert mentioned, out of context development, of course, has been an issue and remains a serious concern for potential soft sites in the neighborhood, because there really, in most of the neighborhood, are not any height caps in development. And just to kind of get into the zoning here, we think the zoning, which is circa 1961, hasn't been changed, and Morningside Heights really has a lot to do with that. Almost every corner of the neighborhood is zoned R8 and hasn't had a contextual rezoning to add height limits like surrounding neighborhoods that you see highlighted in pink on the map there. And that's where tall luxury towers have been able to take advantage, pretty much as high as they can build and fit their bulk into the sky exposure plane. They can build that high. Another issue that we noticed are the commercial corridors, which are, the zoning here is also outdated. There's C14 commercial overlays along Broadway and Amsterdam that make it harder than we think is necessary to open or sustain a business. And there's also a long stretch of Broadway that has no commercial overlays, which leads to blank walls, pedestrian dead areas like you see in the photo here. And leaves a handful of spaces that are grandfathered in as retail, in kind of a precarious position if they, when tenants turn over. So our goals for the rezoning really flow out of those core needs that we just looked at. Protecting rent stabilized clusters, producing new affordable housing, preserving contextual character, and encouraging retail and commercial corridors. And, we attempted to kind of like map out where we're aiming to do all of those things on the map you see there. So we'll look at each of those actions that we're looking to take. And as requested, I'll try to focus on the CB7 element, but I do want to give you just a sense of what's happening in the rest of the area as well. So we aim to help protect clusters of rent stabilized units just by modestly reducing allowable height and density into very carefully targeted areas in the northern part of the neighborhood that meet the criteria you see with the orange bullets here. In areas of the neighborhood that are markedly lower income and lower density. We know that zoning alone doesn't ensure protection of rent stabilized units, but we do believe it can help. The next proposed zoning action is to map R9A and R10A districts adjacent to the 125th and 110th Street subway stations, which would increase density in these two areas and trigger mandatory inclusionary housing or MIH requirements of around 25% affordable units for any new development. And I'll just say here, both community boards, I think, have spoken really poignantly about the need to add affordable housing in the area. And we agree that doing so in what we talk about as high opportunity areas, so areas with excellent access to employment opportunities and services, is an opportunity to further both the community's goals and this team's for fair housing policy. So within these upzoned areas, we identified 4 sites that appear likely to be redeveloped. You can see them highlighted here in red. I know it's a little tough to see, but we will kind of zoom into each one. The northern 2 are above 110th Street, and then there's 2 southern ones that are south of 110th Street in Community Board 7's jurisdiction. So I'll go through the first couple fairly quickly, but so you have an idea, and then we can look at the 2 that are in CB7. The first one is at the corner of Broadway and 125th Street. It's currently a 1-story building with R7-2 zoning, and it's occupied by a handful of retail. This is a big site. We are proposing to upzone it to R9A with mandatory inclusionary housing. That would mean that they could build up to 8.5 FAR and a maximum of 17 stories. With this site and with all 4 of the projected development sites, because they're on Broadway, we do assume that there would be ground floor retail. And we came up with projections for how many units could be built under the proposed zoning. And our projection is about 353 total. Since it's MIH, about 88 of those would have to be affordable. Our projection for what could be built presently without rezoning is about 141 units. And of course, none of those would have to be affordable. With these projections, these are just our initial estimates. And we haven't gone through environmental review yet, so they are kind of initial estimates. The second projected development site is 2861 Broadway at the corner of 111th Street. There are 4 buildings here of 2 to 3 stories. It's currently R8 zoning. And you can see in the map here, all of the next 3 projected sites we're proposing R10A so that we can trigger mandatory inclusionary. So with the second site could be built under R10A with MIH to 12 FAR and 23 stories maximum. We project 245 total units here, 61 of which would be affordable. And moving into the projected sites that are in Community Board 7 jurisdiction, site 3 is at 2825 Broadway. This is between 109th and 110th Streets. Currently, we have 2 1-story buildings here. It's a bank and a pharmacy. Current zoning is R9A with voluntary inclusionary housing mapped there. And here we go. Again, proposing R10A with MIH here. So again, could be built to 12 FAR and 23 stories. With ground floor retail, we assume we project it could produce 278 residential units, 70 of which would be affordable. And again, just in contrast to what presently could be built, we project around 190 units. And actually, sorry, the 0 affordable, I'm just gonna actually look at the kind of voluntary inclusionary housing information here, because the note here is that, as many of you are familiar because you worked on the rezoning for this area, both this site and the next one were rezoned to R9A in 2007, of course, in the hopes that they'd be developed under voluntary inclusionary housing. They're both pretty large sites occupied by single-story buildings immediately adjacent to a subway station. So obviously there's a lot of development potential there to tap into, although no affordable developments have yet come out of it. But if voluntary inclusionary housing were to be used by a developer, our estimate is that it could produce somewhere around 190 units with 38 affordable for this site. Although I'll just note that VIH unit production is difficult to forecast because VIH development affordable unit counts are subject to negotiation between the developer and the city. So they're kind of notoriously difficult to forecast, more difficult than MIH.
Not true.
So the last projected development site here, and the other one in CB7 is at 2810 Broadway on the southeast corner of 109th Street. Currently a one-story building, also R9A with VIH currently, and occupied by a handful of retail like the Santander Bank. And so again, very, very similar to the last site, what could be built here under what we're proposing, the R10A with MIH, is 12 FAR and 23 stories max. We project about 150 residential units could be built, with 38 of those required to be affordable. And with voluntary inclusionary housing, our estimate is that about 102 could be built, with 20 of those ending up affordable. But again, just kind of a disclaimer on those being difficult to forecast. So just moving towards the end of the presentation here, our next zoning action is a contextual rezoning that places a height cap on new development to ensure that it remains in context with its neighboring buildings. That height cap would be 17 stories on wide streets and 12 stories on narrow streets. And the contextual district is indicated by the A after the R8 and R9, R8A and R9A that you see there. The wide narrow street thing is a little bit technical, so I won't go into it now, but happy to address that in the Q&A if people have questions. And our final proposed action is C2 commercial overlays up and down Amsterdam and Broadway, as you see mapped there at the left. This includes mapping a new overlay on Upper Broadway, where you have those pedestrian dead zones in an effort to potentially create new retail establishments, and also upgrading existing overlays from C1 to C2, both C14 to C24, and those couple of small spots in CB7 that are currently C15, we propose to upgrade to C25. And that's to increase options for property owners to be able to have uses like theaters, bike repair shops, and small amusements. So as I mentioned, the planning study is now out and available online. After we conclude our community board presentations, with MHCC's leadership, we're looking to host a larger format town hall later this month or early next month. And we're also looking to do presentations to interested stakeholders. On the application side, we're still looking for funding to do an EAS. We're not there yet, unfortunately. And we're also just maintaining communication with DCP so that, once we get to the environmental review stage, we'll be ready to dive into a pre-application process with DCP. So I'm going to leave it there. This is just a summary slide for you, and happy to take any questions. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you. So thank you for the presentation, and thank you for coming to us before, this study has gotten much further. I understand that you've met with different members through some changing leadership of the Community Board 7, but this really is the first time that the Community Board as a larger group gets to see what you're proposing. And it certainly looks like there's a lot of thought and goodwill in it. And I totally understand the idea of not having, you know, the 110th Street isn't just a borderline between CB7 and CB9. It's the heart of both of our communities to some degree.
And Mark, do you know how many people have signed up to speak?
There was no formal sign-up process. I see a couple of hands raised. Shelley's among them, but there are a couple.
Other than board members.
Right now, there are 2 hands raised. I see Dan Cohen and Lynn Max, and now I see Pablo Zavallos. So 3 from the community have raised their hands so far.
All right, why don't we I think we should take those first. Ask you to limit your comments to 2 minutes each.
Richard, I disagree. I think we should go around the committee first and see if there's any questions for clarification. I mean,
can we get this straight? I mean, what's happening here? I mean, if the community members have their hands up, and this is not a ULURP and so on, but it's questions and so on, why can't that occur? And then the committee members go around. If you want to do it the other way, okay, but there is a question of time as well.
Of course, we want to hear the community board members and the public at large. But if we're going for the public questions first, then that means we're not going back to them. And so I think it's usually the way that we do this is we have the community board ask their questions first. But if you want to give everybody their chance to speak before we speak, that's fine.
Whatever you
I think it makes more sense to do it that way. Let's try it and see what happens.
I asked the presenter to take their screen down because I think for purposes of discussion, it would be facilitated if we could see one another. Thanks.
Sure thing.
All right, but again, community members, 2 minutes. If you need that long.
I'm sorry, Richard, are we going to the community first or the board members?
Yeah,
Okay.
Let's see how that works.
Okay. So I'll promote a couple of folks. Dan Cohen is first, followed by Lynn Max. I'm going in the order, Richard, in which, and Jeanette, in which Zoom tells me they signed up to speak.
Fine.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Dan Cohen. I know a number of you from the community. I also previously served on Community Board 7. I now serve on Community Board 9. I just wanted to express both appreciation for the thought that's been put into this plan, but I also want to urge Community Board 7 in its considerations, and I understand it's not voting on anything tonight, and this is just simply informative, but to take into consideration that this board already went through an effort to zone these sites in its purview, namely the sites between 108th and 110th Street along Broadway, and deliberately zone them at R9A, which provides for a height limit of about 15 stories, which is in context with everything else surrounding it. The proposal to increase the density and the height limit associated with it would, at 23 stories, would be much taller than anything else around it by far. But I also want to acknowledge the need for both affordable housing and to be supportive of the broader Morningside Heights rezoning. And I think there is a compromise that I'd like to suggest, which is that you can increase the density to R10A for those sites between 108th and 110th Street, but you don't have to increase the height limit. It would just be shorter, fatter buildings, but they are not inefficient apartments. They're perfectly comfortable. They just wouldn't go all the way up to 23 stories. You can still maintain the height limit of an R9A zoning while increasing the density to R10A for all those sites within CB7's purview between 108th Street and 110th Street. And perhaps the developer of those sites wouldn't get the premium rents that the extra 7 stories or so would provide overlooking Riverside Park, which I understand that the desire, but considering that this community and this community board has previously spoken about a height limit for that site, I think it would be thoughtful to consider maintaining that height limit while also accommodating the increased density that's been suggested in this plan.
R9.5A.
Yep, for R9A.
9.5A.
R9.5A.
9.5.
5.5. I have done a spreadsheet that outlines the FAR for this, and I'm happy to circulate it. I think some people on this call have seen it. I'm happy to share it with others. That shows how you can comfortably fit all of the FAR without creating crazy apartments. They're just sort of, shorter, fatter buildings with normal size apartments as opposed to taller, skinnier towers that maximize the height. I wanted to impress upon this board to take that into consideration, considering its previous iteration had made that decision.
Please send us that. It's being very useful.
I will absolutely do so. To whose attention should I send it to them for distribution? Richard, I'll send it to you.
That's fine.
Dan,
Yeah,
send it to me and I'll do it.
circulate it.
I'll send it to everybody whose email I have on this call, and you should feel free to share it with reckless abandon. I yield the rest of my time.
The next person that was signed up in that order was Lynn Max, followed by Pablo Zavallos. Lynn, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay, thank you. I'm actually yielding my time to Steve Max, who will speak on behalf of Three Parks Independent Democrats.
Steve has not raised his hand yet, but I'll promote him. Why don't we go to Pablo next, and then we'll get Steve.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry I'm running an errand, so that's why I'm on the street right now. But thank you for the presentation, and it's really been very cool to follow this plan from the earlier stages on to now at this pretty advanced point. I have three questions. One, given the passage of the 2019 rent laws, is there still as much of a need to use zoning to protect the rent stabilized tenants, given that it's appropriately, in my view, much harder to exit rent stabilization because of the limits on vacancy bonuses and the end of deregulation thresholds and the increased threshold to convert from rentals to co-ops? My second question is, was there any thought given to using the deep affordability option for MIH for the southern sites in particular, which are, as you mentioned, Andrew, in or very close to high opportunity areas? And the third question is, how much of the retail problem do you expect to be able to address, given that Columbia does own a fair amount of the property along Broadway, and it would seem difficult to be able to accommodate retail opportunities on some of those corridors? Thank you.
We're going to continue with comments, and then we'll circle back and try to answer those questions.
Thanks.
So the next person was Larry Wood.
Steve Max is now available to talk.
Co-chairs, is that where we should go?
Yeah.
You have your hand on the.
Steve Max is in the meeting and can unmute himself if that's where you want to go.
Okay.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm Steve Max, speaking on behalf of the board of Three Parks Independent Democrats. We are entirely opposed to the upzoning of the two areas in Board 7 on Broadway between 109th and 110th Streets. We do support our Morningside Heights neighbors in their effort to get protective zoning in their community within the Board 9 area. We won for our area the protection they seek for theirs. We will not stand to lose it. Our goal was and is to preserve what is affordable in our area and to protect the character of our community from irresponsible development. We are in favor of affordable housing and would be delighted if the city would take the threatened sites by eminent domain and build 100% affordable housing there. But of course, that's not the plan. Instead, there will be 23-story luxury apartments, and if the developer can find buildings over in Harlem within a half mile, he can rent those apartments there to families with an income just under $70,000 and call that inclusionary housing. The plan itself sets a dangerous precedent of spot zoning in the Board 7 area, and it violates the sound principle of contextual zoning for an entire neighborhood, which we currently enjoy. Spot zoning is no zoning at all. It exists only until a developer wants a specific lot, say the Metro Diner, and then that particular lot is rezoned to maximize profits with great hand-wringing over affordable housing, which has very little to do with it. It's very hard to mobilize community opposition to a rezoning when it's only one lot involved. With spot zoning, the whole neighborhood gets picked off a block at a time. In closing, we want Board 7 members to know that the large portion of the report you're considering claiming extensive community involvement is fraudulent. There were pretty pictures of community meetings, but none were held in the Board 7 area to discuss the upzoning here. Only the people who get the good stuff were invited. We only learned of it at the end of last year after the planning was complete. There's been no input from us, and we cannot understand why it was not brought to us sooner. If this plan ever comes to a ULURP, we urge Board 7 to reject the spot upzoning in that portion. We would be sympathetic to hearing more about Dan Cohn's plan. We're open to that.
Thank you. Mark?
The next person would be Larry Wood from Goddard Riverside. Larry, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you. I actually posted a statement on behalf of Goddard Riverside in the chat box, in the question and answer box. I don't know if that's visible to anybody. But I want to say Goddard Riverside is in support of this framework. This is just a very preliminary proposal and has to go through a whole process. It's a really tough balancing act between figuring out what you can upzone and what you can preserve. And we think this was a very open, inclusive process, and it's just a start. So Goddard Riverside was involved, we were consulted, and we think this would be a good framework to start with. So we're looking forward to the planning process in the future, and we'll be involved then as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's it for public speakers.
There's one more, is Cynthia Doty. Unless Cynthia has ceded her time.
No, I'll just say a couple things. I was impressed with the presentation, and I noticed frequently the words using community plan, a community plan as opposed to top down. But I needed to remind everybody that the rezoning that Community Board 7 did to rezone from 96 to 110th Street was a community-led rezoning. It had nothing to do with top-down, and we had a lot of obstacles to fight for. It took years for us doing it. My co-leader, Bob Botfeld, was instrumental in a lot of the negotiations, and I think maybe we were starting to forget that whole saga that happened with Community Board 7. We worked, Shelley was very involved in it, Ethel was very involved in it. We did a lot of work and the goal was to protect the area from becoming overdeveloped. We did not only along Broadway, but we did all of the side streets as well. And I think suddenly allowing, even though those two blocks in Community Board 7 are undeveloped at the moment, allowing it to suddenly go to 23 stories is completely opposite to the community plan that we spent years working on. We wanted to have control over the height. So if Dan's proposal can work with it being limited and more of a dense development, I think that is something that we would agree to. We would love to be able to force more affordable housing, but the trend often is developers want to go as high as possible so that the top floors can be luxury apartments, and then they kind of figure out through some sort of loophole of how to do an affordable unit. It might be a studio that they provide as an affordable unit, and that's not really helping the neighborhood that much. Or as Dan says, or somebody said, they could go to, or maybe it was Steve, they could go to another area with a few blocks away and call that their affordable housing. That's already been happening all over the city and especially on the Upper West Side. So I think I want to join with Morningside Heights. I know they've put a lot of effort into this, and I certainly appreciate their need and their goals and their aspirations, but I don't want it to deny the aspirations of Community Board 7 that we spent years and years, and we had crowds of 800 people come out to our meetings to discuss this. So I just, I don't know that all of our board members remember all of the effort that went on in order to get the rezoning done, but I'm here to remind you, and we can actually present a lot of documentation for that if necessary.
Thank you.
Richard, there was one more community member. I'm sorry. Her name is Miriam Raban or Rabin. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing. I'm going to allow you to unmute yourself. And then, Richard, are we going to call it a day there with community comments?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry. Richard and Jeanette, I mean to say, excuse me.
I'm sorry. Should I start?
Yes.
Yeah, so my name is Miriam Raban, well pronounced. I live at 395 Riverside Drive, which is at 112th. And I wanted to speak up for the need to prevent even more gentrification than we've already had. I hear the plan has as a major goal affordable housing, but a major controversy in rezoning is affordable to whom? AMI in the area is about $40,000. And in this plan, my understanding is the developer can rent to people in the quote affordable housing for double that amount. And the affordable housing can be outside the neighborhood. I want a diverse neighborhood around me. I don't want luxury developers to claim they're building affordable housing that actually leads to more gentrification. So I'm concerned that despite the stated goal of keeping a diverse community, much of which we've already lost, this plan will promote affordable housing with very little outcome for truly affordable housing from our neighborhood. So I support Dan's plan on the height, but I do want to speak up really strongly, as it sounds like you heard in your meetings, for truly affordable housing. Thanks.
Thank you. Shelley, I think, was the first committee
Thank
member
you.
who had his hand up.
Thank you. Well, first, the Morningside Heights group has done, and with others, done an amazing job of analyzing their area and attempting to do a lot of good things for a lot of good reasons. And a lot of those good reasons were the same reasons we had in our rezoning, which Ethel gave leadership to. I was the chair of the board. Richard and Paige, chairs of the land use committee, we're all still here and remember. But I want to first correct 3 statements that were made for their accuracy. One was that we did 9A in hopes that we would have affordable housing. Not true. We compromised with 9A because the mayor's deputy mayor was pushing for upzoning as high as they could on Broadway. And the compromise that allowed us to move forward was the 9A, only adding 2 floors, but getting some affordable housing. So we didn't hope for affordable housing there. In fact, our latest affordable housing was 100% affordable housing, 290 units on 108th Street. And that's the type of affordable housing we're aiming at. Second, a comment was made, it could have been just for that area, but with the 9A not producing any affordable units, not true. 103rd Street, the Marrakech on 103rd Broadway is benefiting from the 9A and affordable housing. So that was the first breakthrough, but we weren't looking to have more and bigger development. We were going to have more controlled contextual development. And third, there was no working group of CB7 and CB9. We hosted it in our nice accommodations, and some people attended certain times, but it wasn't a working group working on this project. I think that's a misstatement. What I'm concerned about is that, as was stated by others, that we violate what our community worked for, and that the differential for those sites in District 7 is not great enough to afford and to create affordable housing and the right-sized house building for that area. which I think the people in that area would be horrified with 23 stories, and we don't need to encourage that. The question I have, because we don't want to put a damper on something good, are those sites in the two sites in Community Board 7 necessary in your zoning plan to make it happen? Okay, if not, let us figure out what we'll do, you know, if we want to reconsider those areas, and call it a day, and we'll wish you well. But is it needed? The differential in affordable housing is minor, and it just violates the community will that we so hard fought for. So if someone could answer whether it's necessary, it would be helpful. Does
Do you want to
anybody
just
know?
answer that?
Yeah, Richard, Jeanette, do you want answers now to land use committee members' questions?
Well, that would be helpful to know that answer, because
the question is, does the CB9 rezoning stand on its own legs, and could it be accomplished without touching CB7 at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's a very appropriate question. I mean, the reality is, like, we don't entirely know, right? We're just putting forward this proposal. We would have to, of course, get approval and support from DCP and the City Planning Commission. Those two sites, you know, as we're projecting it, could produce quite a number of affordable units. I think our projections have it at like over 40% of the affordable units that could be produced in this whole neighborhood rezoning. So it is a, you know, a major contributor to this whole neighborhood-wide plan.
But I think if I can jump in as a co-chair here, I think one of the issues is that you presented this great, and I know we kept it short, but this great process that Community Board 9 and the City Council and the Borough President's Office, you know, did on looking really comprehensively at your community board. And you said, you know, community boards don't stop at a line and then cross, but you put the border of your study just a block into our community board, and you didn't do that kind of comprehensive as what is the impact of developing these buildings around the 110th Street station so much taller, and is that trade-off between the additional height and density for the number of affordable units, which is the last person mentioned, you know, at what AMI. You really start to, it's really hard for us to look at that and say, yes, in addition, the fact that you're upzoning the 125th Street sites to what our 110th Street sites already are shows that you're pushing our boundaries up higher because they're already high. And then on top of that, we have the rezoning proposal later on the agenda tonight of additional density and height for MTA improvements. So I think a lot more study needs to be done around the Community Board 7 sites if we were to include them. And we just don't have time to get into all the details tonight, but this is a good introductory conversation.
Louisa? Unmute. Lisa, we're gonna have a permanent sign on your screen that says unmute. You're still muted. I think.
Can you hear me?
Now. All right.
Okay, thank you. Following up on the conversation that we've been having, what I would like to know is why you felt the need to cross over the border and include the two sites that are in Community Board 7. If you're saying that it is to increase the amount of affordable housing, you could just keep moving down or up and spreading this district and include more affordable housing. What is the reason why you crossed over? That's a question to Andrew Lassiter, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andrew?
Thanks, Louisa. Yeah, I mean, you know, we wanted to do our best to look at the neighborhood holistically. And when we looked at, you know, where are sites that could produce affordable housing, I think it didn't make sense to us to draw, you know, a line at 110th Street when to us, there are clearly sites, you know, just across that street, just across that boundary, that definitely have the potential to create affordable housing, which is, you know, our whole goal, to produce new affordable housing around that transit station.
Of course, and I appreciate the effort that has gone into this. I'm just really surprised that I'm sure there were other sites within the district, perhaps if you went north, or if the city council is contemplating more affordable housing, they could come in and do separate approach Community Board 7 about different sites that are in this district and that perhaps could try to keep, I like the idea of making more sites more affordable and perhaps trying to keep lower, more squat buildings by city council regulations, rather than kind of just crossing over and saying, we're going to use those two sites. It just, I frankly haven't heard a reason that justifies that yet. I didn't the first time and I don't now.
Can I address some of the questions?
No, not yet. Please, please. We have, the purpose of this meeting is for you to listen to us. All right, we've listened to you.
There's so many issues raised.
You know what? We're gonna have these discussions over the next couple of years. We don't have time tonight to have a back and forth like that. All right. My understanding of tonight's meeting is that you wanted to take the pulse of this committee, and you're not going to do that by filibustering. All right. So just let us talk and listen. Ethel.
No filibustering. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. First, I do not want to unduly analyze sites in Board 9, but you did mention 568 West 125th Street, and you showed it being right at a very significant, highly used station, namely 125th Street, which is likely to be increasing in ridership. It also occupies an entire block. And the developer is very amenable to retail and various other things. Why that site looks like 10A to me, and I don't know, I haven't done the analysis, that if it would be 10A, the yield on MIH would be greater than with 9A. That's just one example of a site in your area. I don't wish to presume, but it stands out, and I happen to have done a lot of work there and knows what it's like. The second point, and for Andrew, please forgive, I know that you all have worked hard and it's been over months, but months ago when a few of us from the Land Use Committee, under the aegis, I think, of Borough President Brewer, who sponsored, there was a discussion of how many affordable units could be created under voluntary inclusionary, the zoning that's there now, and how many under MIH. And we did get an analysis, and the numbers were different, which I've kept them, and I think I obtained them, the same thing from Mark Diller, because we had the spreadsheets, and we were told how many could come under voluntary, under 9A, and how many under 10A at each site. You cited different numbers tonight. I don't want to, I'm not accusing or anything. I just want to understand, what are we doing here? In any case, even those that you stated verbally, and those that we had that were given to us in writing, indicate a difference roughly in each case of approximately 30 more units on each at each site, if it were 10A or 9A. Again, I think that really has to be clear on the yield. And another quick point, and then a question. It's very important to recognize that when Board 7 began to do this so many years ago, among other things, Board 7 recognized to its upset that below the 10A that we had achieved earlier, the zoning was 8. And a lot of your zoning in 9 is 8, in addition to the fact that you have so many not-for-profits. What we learned to our chagrin was that 8, the number is less than 9 or 10, but there is no height limit in 8. And that's why Board 7 took a look and as of right, recognized that we're getting 2 very, very tall buildings at 100th Street. That motivated an enormous community outcry, and there are other people here who were involved in it. But it was then, and the administration didn't want to help, didn't want any rezoning, and this was a big community effort. I will only say this, lastly, it went on for 2.5 years. It was an extraordinary effort, and the city planning changed in order to accept an application. And we and the people here who did a lot of the work, and Shelley assigned me to, and he did it really for the community board, but we managed to get the rezoning that preserved what we had already worked for and the context. And a big thing was mid-blocks to save that housing. And that was successful. And then there was going to be more upzoning, but all of us and everybody worked, and we got 9A. Was it everything that the community wanted? But it happened. And so I think that, and now for the first time, admittedly it's years, there appears to be at least one example about to occur of voluntary inclusionary housing under 9A, and maybe there will be more. So I'm just suggesting, and I very much commend your effort, but somehow reaching in this way to Board 7, because there seemed to be an opportunity, flies against the very clear, cohesive zoning and rezoning that was based on size, bulk, preservation, avoidance of gentrification, and promoting affordable housing to the extent we could while promoting those other values. So I hope we can continue to work together, because there is a great deal of respect, but not one that looked for an opportunity to solve something else that you might solve by some more work in your own area. But we're glad to work together on that.
Thank you. Paige? Unmute.
Thanks. I remember this era in my very junior position. It was trial by fire, and I took all the meeting minutes and put together all the documents for every single meeting that we had. And Shelley, I'm not going to go through 2 of your points I remember vividly, and Ethel, your tutelage during that period about things. I only have one, or a hyphenated word, and that's unintended consequences. Because the best planning, unfortunately, we just don't have a crystal ball. And if you recall, back in the days with dealing with the Jewish Home Life Care Hospital, there was a land swap. Who would have predicted that? Aerial east and west, loss of taxpayers, this mega store, Walgreens and Dwayne Reed, I think Richard used to call it, oh, good, we're getting another storefront with a big pill pictured on the front. And there's unintended consequences. So even though we try to find the right zoning application for this, I think it has to be drilled down and far tighter grain. And I think you have to look at the housing stock, because looking now at what happened between 96th Street and 100th Street, that retail corridor, I'll never forget the day that the developer stood up there and said, well, don't worry, we've created open space. It's on the 4th floor, but of course you have to own an apartment to be able to get up there. And this is what happens when you are doing these sweeping assumptions that everybody's going to play by the same rules, and they don't. And I'm right now in the camp, Bob and Andrew, great work. But I think I right now would want to hold my vote and keep things as we had envisioned for our neighborhood, because otherwise it will be a wall of new development, and it will be closed in. We'll be a fortress dividing between the two of us. So I'm sorry, but I need to know more. And I look forward to hearing about this. And also, Richard, revisiting some of the issues that we had plagued us when we were looking at our own downzoning. Okay, thank you.
Mark.
Thank you. And I'm going to violate my own rule of limiting myself to adding without repeating, because while I agree with almost everything that has been said by my colleagues, I will repeat my deep respect for community-led processes. And that applies both to the incredible amount of work done north of 110th Street by our colleagues up there, as well as the work that preceded my involvement at Community Board 7, well, my membership of Community Board 7 in the rezoning that Paige was just talking about. I will, one of the things that we were asking questions about when we were briefed on these things was the delta, the difference between mandatory and voluntary inclusionary housing. I completely accept and understand that it's not always an apples to apples comparison, because the AMI levels are different. To Ms. Raban's point, we certainly are mindful of that. There isn't always an easy answer to that. And so without repeating what Ethel said, it's not just spreadsheets that we saw privately. The numbers that I saw on today's slides were different than the numbers on pages 27 and 28 of the report. And so I'm not sure, I just call that to everyone's attention. Obviously there is as much art as there is science in some of these predictions and projections, but we need a unified set of factors. And thankfully, we don't have to vote on anything tonight. So I just hope that that's a helpful comment. Thank you.
I'd like to, if I can, just put in my 2 cents worth. The Community Board 7 is on record. We have a resolution asking that parts of our district be zoned for mandatory inclusionary housing. And I strongly support that. And I don't rule out that at some point I might be willing to trade a little extra height or bulk for additional affordable units. When we say only 30 or only 60 affordable units, that's 60 families. I strongly feel that the percentage of AMI that is used to rent those units should be lower than has been the case in other areas in the district. Right. But having said that, I join my colleagues in regretting that Community Board 7 has not been part of this planning process. When we did our own rezoning many years ago, it was painstaking. We looked at the height of every building in the entire district that was being rezoned to see what was contextual and what was not. So far as I can tell, that has not been done, or at least it hasn't been presented to us in this case. So we don't know whether a 24-story building would be a sore thumb or simply a slightly higher structure. And finally, I like Dan Cohn's, I like to study Dan Cohn's suggestion because sometimes you can fiddle with bulk without having a great negative impact. And I would go out of my way to try to do that in order to gain even one more affordable unit. Robert, I know you wanted to speak, and we'll give you the last word.
Well, thank you very much, Richard. And I, applaud your concern about more affordable housing and giving some height in order to enable that. Your rezoning was inspirational to us. When we talked to people in the neighborhood, we pointed to the Extell Tower, said, look what happened over there. That's going to happen here. And sure enough, it did with the Savannah, the Vanderwater, and now also the UTS building, 40 stories, all luxury housing, putting a tremendous burden on tax rates, et cetera. I don't have to tell you all of this, you know it. The issue, though, that we see is there's sort of, and Andrew should really talk to this more about the integrity of the plan. Jeanette, I know you're an urban planner, and you look at this and you say, why go over the border? Well, because that's where the transit hub is, and that's where the opportunity is for transit accessibility access, and or zoning for transitability access. And so there's all of that. The other issue here is in that spot on 110th Street. Unfortunately, the 9A did not trigger the development you were looking for. And so we're hoping that an R10A would. Dan Cohen, you've come up with a solution. Andrew Lassiter has looked at this. The problem with it is it isn't going to necessarily attract a developer to develop that. If it were city-owned land, like on 108th Street, where they develop that wonderful affordable housing, that would be great. But we don't have that. Certainly, we all are suffering under the AMI rigid structure of, sure, we would like it all more affordable. We would like that very much. We'd love to work with you on achieving that. It just isn't there right now. So to create all the affordable units we want, this was the plan. We are very open to continuing this discussion. It won't be decided tonight. We thank you so much for listening. I want to turn it over to Andrew quickly to comment on maybe specifically on some of the things. You want to talk?
Well, no, look,
I'll defer to Richard.
Unless members have an open question, I think we need to get on. We have a ULURP item tonight. I would just ask, just because this bleeds into our ULURP item, what it would be the effect of an R10A zoning with a 20 or 25% accessibility bonus? Anybody know the answer to that, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, from our own understanding, and I'm sure you all know or will soon know just as much about zoning for transit. The zoning for transit bonus could be added to the MIH density, so it could result.
You're looking at a potential 14.4 FAR.
It could result in one or more stories added and more density.
More than that. More than that.
Sure. 20% more.
Yes, I mean, much more than that.
All right. Okay. Let's thank you, everybody. Thank members of the public. Thank you, Mr. Andrew and Robert. It's been a fruitful discussion. We will be eagerly awaiting details of the kind that is necessary before there is a rezoning, and we will study it with more or less of an open mind.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And please, don't hesitate to involve us in the planning. We sort of like to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I took close notes of all of the questions and comments.
Very good.
And we'll be happy.
Thank you
to
very
follow
much,
up.
everybody.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's it. Anybody move to adjourn?
So moved.
We'll take a vote first and then we'll hear the presentation.
How you want to handle the
Well,
the
next,
ULURP or-
next on the calendar is Nebula about the hotel. If you can give us a quick presentation on that. Obviously, we're not sticking to our schedule, so it's going to be more than a 2-hour meeting, but let's try to be efficient.
Yeah, this
Also, what is our timetable on that?
So for the hotel special permit, your deadline is July 12th.
Oh, so we got time.
Yeah, all right.
Yep. I will be as quick as I possibly can. This is a pretty straightforward proposal. So let me just share my screen. And as I'm doing that, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Nabila Malik. I'm the planner for Community Board 7 at the Department of City Planning. And you may know that the City Planning Commission certified this hotel special permit text amendment earlier this week. And
excuse me, I don't know if other people are having difficulty, but we're only seeing half the slide.
Oh, I'm sorry.
There
Is
we
that
go.
better?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
that's good.
Okay, great.
That's better. Yeah.
Okay, so this project is a zoning text amendment that would create a new special permit for hotel development across the city in commercial districts. The goal is to create a consistent framework for hotel development and ensure that new hotels do not negatively affect the surrounding area. So I just want to start with a quick description of New York City's hotel market in the past decade. By 2019, before the pandemic hit, the city experienced record growth in the tourism industry and its hotel pipeline for the 10th consecutive year. So visitor trends peaked in 2019 with almost 67 million visitors, up from 46 million in 2009. Furthermore, sizable growth of hotel room supply has been a prevailing factor in New York for much of the past decade. Between 2009 and 2019, the total number of hotel rooms in the market grew from just over 80,000 to over 127,800. In the past 5 years, we saw a 40% increase in hotel inventory. Despite this increase in hotel room supply, demand also continued to rise, keeping the annual occupancy at almost 87%. Occupancy rates in the city are among the highest for urban markets in the US. So the growth of the market in the last decade was driven by both international and domestic travelers. And these visitors are coming to the city for its cultural offerings, sightseeing, etc. So over the years, rapid growth of new hotels across different districts in the city has led to concerns about conflicts with surrounding uses. Notably, in 2018, a special permit was adopted for hotels in M1 districts to address conflicts between hotels and the operations of industrial businesses. So to address these concerns, the City Planning Commission adopted a variety of special permits relating to hotel development in different special districts. And this has resulted in an inconsistent framework for regulating hotels. Furthermore, in commercial and mixed use districts, MX districts, hotels have introduced conflicts with surrounding uses. Overnight accommodations differ from other as of right uses in proximity because they're similar to both commercial and residential uses, but they also have the potential to conflict with both. This unique distinction of hotels may require additional scrutiny to ensure they are developed in ways that won't present conflicts with the neighborhood and local businesses. A robust tourism economy is vital to the city's economic health, and it's expected to recover from the pandemic. Once the industry recovers, hotel development is expected to resume, and the patterns of this development over the last 15 years still indicate a need to ensure that hotel development does not create conflict with surrounding uses. So therefore, the proposed text amendment will create a consistent framework for new hotels and allow the City Planning Commission to evaluate each hotel development's impact on the future use and development of the surrounding area. And just to provide some real life context and the potential for hotels to create land use conflicts, you know, there's already an awareness of conflicts between hotels and light manufacturing or M1 districts. There are several commercial districts in the city where hotels are in areas where it can be in conflict with nearby businesses, or the site may be planned in a way that is unsafe for guests and residents. So here you can see the hotel in the C62 district is an example where the hotel is set back from the street, creating a less than ideal pedestrian environment. And on the right, you see a hotel, this is in the Rockaways, where better site planning may have led to a wider sidewalk. The current sidewalk leading to the beach is thin and creates an unsafe condition. So the special permit will be applicable in higher density commercial districts, mixed use districts, and paired M1 residential districts where there's not a special permit today. So the new special permit will apply to those areas that already have a special permit. M1 districts will retain the findings from the M1 hotel special permit, since those addressed unique concerns in light industrial areas. So this slide shows the applicability in Community Board 7. Sorry, that's a typo in the slide, but the map is CB7. And the areas in pink are where the new special permit would apply. The area in gray is where existing special permits for hotels apply. So that's, I don't know if you can even see it, but it's this little small patch. As you all may know, that's the only M1 district in CB7, which is the Con Ed building site. So similar to M1, we will not require a special permit for hotels that are for a public purpose, such as temporary housing for the homeless. This means that rules for siting of homeless facilities will not change and will continue to be permitted as of right in districts where they are currently allowed. While we understand the concerns, the proposal is intended to address the land use concerns related to commercial hotels and is neutral with current policies regarding homelessness. As you may know, the city has a legal obligation to provide these facilities in emergency situations. So I do want to touch briefly on the recent impacts of the pandemic on the hotel industry and ways that we have modified the proposal to try to address these challenges. The pandemic has had a significant effect on the hotel market. Between January and November 2020, a net total of 146 hotels out of 705 and over 42,000 rooms have closed. Luxury and upscale room types accounted for almost 85% of this loss. Estimates by the city's independent budget office placed job losses in the hospitality and leisure industry at around 197,000 jobs in 2020. So COVID has had an impact on this industry, but there is optimism that the city will recover and visitors will return, with many experts placing this recovery in 2025. With that return in demand, the Department of City Planning anticipates development to return to pre-pandemic levels, leading to a need for the special permit for better regulation. However, we don't want these regulations to prevent recovery of the city. So because of these impacts, we've created several provisions to minimize the likelihood that the special permit will impair the recovery of the hotel industry. So these include modified vesting provisions to facilitate projects that are already in the pipeline. So aging projects filed with DOB prior to 2018 need to obtain a foundation permit prior to adoption of this of the special permit text proposal. So that would, if this gets approved, adoption would be in November of this year. Projects filed between January 1st, 2018 and referral need to obtain zoning plan approval from DOB prior to adoption. And both categories of vested projects have 6 years instead of the standard 2 from date of adoption to complete construction. Approved CPC or BSA applications will not require a special permit if these applications were approved after January 1st, 2018. And applications that begin City Planning Commission public review or are filed with BSA prior to adoption will not require a special permit. Finally, there's an extended discontinuance provision allowing vacant hotels extra time to return to transient use. So usual discontinuance allows for a building that has been vacant for 2 years to reopen with its previous use. We're proposing an extension to 6 years to allow for closed hotels to reopen. These provisions are meant to allow for a portion of those 42,000 closed rooms to return, bringing back an important industry. So a draft environmental impact statement and market study were done to understand what the projected loss in rooms would mean for the hotel and tourism industries. And findings of the study and draft EIS show that we expect sufficient inventory by 2030 to support the amount of pre-pandemic visitors, which is a robust tourism economy. However, because of the special permit being expected to slow the growth of new hotels, it's expected that there would not be enough rooms to meet demand of the no action in 2035, leading to a shortfall of around 47,000 rooms. Because of the future shortfall of rooms and potential effects on visitation, the draft EIS is showing a significant adverse impact on the hotel and tourism industries. So this is the proposed text and findings of the special permit. It's important to note that the proposed special permit does not preclude hotel development, nor does it deem all future hotels inappropriate. It requires that the City Planning Commission assess the appropriateness of such development based on the future use and development of the surrounding area. So that is the presentation. Happy to answer any questions you have. And in the interest of time, if you would prefer to provide me with a list of questions, I can get back to you, but also happy to answer them now.
Thank you. I see Louisa. Unmute.
Notice I was muted. For the
I think
good
you
of
just
the
like
group.
to think about what you're going to say before you unmute.
I wish. Okay, you just talked about that the findings were for the future use and development of the neighborhood. But what you showed us were actual design issues, that a hotel was set back from the street, preventing the streetscape, and that the sidewalk was too small. So when you talk about future use and development, what specific issues are you addressing?
So that's a really good question, and the reason why the finding is proposed to be quite vague is because this is a citywide text, and there are unique conditions depending on the commercial district and just depending on the sort of surrounding land uses. And so you're right in that the examples I showed you were specific to design, but part of that is sort of what the surrounding use and development is. And so you're right. The finding is vague, but it's left that way purposely so that the commission can sort of analyze and have applicants explain, the interaction of the hotel use with the surrounding area.
I do understand that and the reason for the vagueness, but it seems to me that a lot of the issues that will arise are design issues, and so that there could be another finding that the design of the project is harmonious, you know the language, with adjoining buildings, with the adjoining block, etc., the social block, just so that when someone looks at it, that they are presenting something that is designed to fit contextually into the neighborhood. That's otherwise, it would seem that yes, we do need something that would be citywide. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm struggling a little bit with this as to why. I mean, hotel use has not changed since, the 1916 zoning. So why all of a sudden this new use requires a special permit? I understand why it was done a couple of years back with the explosion of hotels in manufacturing districts. That seems to make a lot of sense. I don't understand what's driving this. I agree. I think that the finding is much too vague and really just gives a lot of authority to the city planning commission to kind of negotiate with hotel developers on a site-by-site basis. Mm-hmm. And it didn't really make a lot of sense to me how this was going to assist the city in recovering. And it also didn't really discuss the impacts at all. Like, what are it's not like this is a noxious or toxic use. I mean, yes, if you have an overnight use, you have people coming and going at all hours, but frankly, you have that for a restaurant, you have that for a residential building, you have that for a commercial building. So I don't see what makes hotel use so different that suddenly it needs a site-by-site special permit. And maybe I missed something and I'll go over the text, before we vote on this, but if there's anything you'd like to add, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, Jeanette, I mean, you bring up really great points. And, what I will say is that there has sort of been a desire for better review of hotel development. That didn't necessarily come out of nowhere, or it didn't come out of the pandemic at all. These were sort of conversations that had been happening prior to last year. And since 2010, the commission has adopted special permits for new hotels as part of special districts and area-wide rezonings in response to concerns about hotel development. But I do understand.
Seems like it's yet another reason why development in New York City is going to be so high, and why the cost of our hotel rooms when we have relatives visit is going to be so high, because of these extra soft costs associated with building in New York City. And so I'd much rather see the commission focus on on other items that have a greater impact than to slow down this development, that I would imagine the market has a handle somewhat on how many rooms they need.
Yeah, and I definitely take your comments. I recommend that, you know, if this is CB7's position, that you do share that in your resolution.
Nabil, I may have missed this. Is this special permit requirement applicable in high density districts as opposed to low density districts?
Yeah, so it would be in high density commercial districts. So so it includes C1 and C2 districts, except for C1 through C14 and C21 and C24 districts where transient hotels are already not permitted. So this is the higher density commercial district.
Yeah, so, I mean, to me, I agree with what Jeanette and Louisa said. That it seems to me that this is a solution in search of a problem. The least disruptive place to put a hotel, it seems to me, is in a high density district. You know, I can't think of any. I haven't heard of, and you haven't presented any specific problems that are not design related. And of course, many people on this committee, including me, think that design ought to be a part of zoning, but it's not. So if you took design out of the equation, I don't see what this accomplishes other than to increase the cost of construction.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Anybody? Paige. Unmute.
Just real quick. First of all, I think you're tackling a very difficult problem. And I've been working with two different hotelier groups about converting existing buildings. It both fell through, and I should have seen it coming. But I do worry that creating a special use panel review and criteria is in a funny way too limiting, because our city does change. The neighborhoods change a lot. You know, all of a sudden everybody's in vogue of going into the manufacturing districts and things. That's a kind of a trendy place to have an office and live. So I don't want it to go for a hotel review and then have to go to the Art Commission or the Landmarks Commission to look at other factors that are going to impact the quality of life and the appearance of these buildings in the neighborhood. So to be honest, I skimmed it for tonight's meeting, and I'll read through it, but I would like to see that, as Richard and others have hinted tonight, we need to also start talking about design and context and materials coming into some of these neighborhoods, particularly Amsterdam and Broadway that you showed, that might be impacted in our neighborhood. That's all. I don't have, I can't say if I approve or disapprove. I just really don't know all of the issues that this might create. Thanks. I think it's a great project, though.
Well, we have, I mean, we can either vote tonight if people are ready to vote, or we have the luxury of deferring until, or maybe we don't have, yeah, we don't have the luxury of deferring to June, because the June full board, I'm sorry, we do have the luxury of deferring because the July full board would be before our deadline.
I would prefer to defer it then, and because I would like a chance to read through it in a little greater detail.
And the bill, if you can provide specific examples of what it is on people's minds. I mean, you've obviously city planning's obviously gone to a great deal of effort here. and you're proposing a zoning modification. It's the first time I can remember where there are where the EAS has found significant adverse consequences, and you're still proposing it. So if you could somehow get somebody or you yourself who can give us a little more guidance as to why this is a good idea. I mean, and from my perspective in CB7, it is completely unnecessary. It may well be necessary in areas of Queens or Brooklyn, but we don't know enough about that to so we're gonna, unless anyone insists on voting tonight, let's table it until our June meeting.
Jeanette and Richard, you do have two community members who have asked to speak on this.
That's fine.
Okay, and I just want to ask it, city planning, is there any issue where hotel development is pushing out affordable housing that is there any of that data that we should look at? And if so, just share that with us before next meeting. And then the other question is the opposite of that. With the change in so many people working from home and empty office buildings, if there's going to be a push for some of these empty office buildings to be changed to hotels, are we really slowing that down by creating these added burden?
Yeah, those are great questions. And I will definitely get back to you with potentially other examples if we have them. And then also the affordable housing question.
Thanks a lot. We have two comments from.
In order, it was Erica Gerson and then Pablo Zavallus.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. And I'm really in awe of all of your knowledge. I'm learning at all these meetings, but just trying to keep up with all of you. It does seem to me that it sounds like a resolution in search of a problem. I still can't really get my head around what we're trying to solve. And yet I have serious reservations. When you speak to the small businesses, this is not hotels, but the small businesses in our community, their number one complaint is not even their rent, it's the bureaucracy they have to deal with the city and the cost of both actually paying someone else to go deal with all of that paperwork and compliance, the multiple agencies, and that cost is both time and money. So I have a lot of reservations about just adding more bureaucracy to any city process. And then in particular, you mentioned that you already expect it to create a shortage in hotels, which limits the ability of financial development in the entire city and our industry of tourism. And then, of course, what does already exist would be even higher. So when our families come to visit us or tourists come, it becomes more expensive. And I think we're always looking for ways to make the city more inclusive. So that's yet another strike against it. The other thing that I wanted to note that hopefully others recognize is our community board. I mean, it wasn't really publicized to the public, but it was shared with many people. And I know there were about 250 people on a call just a few days ago on a presentation titled Hotels to Housing. So I'm really kind of shocked here to hear this very important information from our city planner who represents our district saying that we, in fact, that the hotels have been growing at an appropriate rate, that our rates of usage of the hotels, the occupancy is extremely high, and that we need them to continue growing. And we expect the need to continue to be at a strong pace, certainly in the next few years by 2025, and then not even have enough in 2030. And yet our elected officials are talking about what we can do to transform some of our hotels and think about buying hotels. So I think that's not obviously part of this resolution, but I would hope that we all have an ear to the ground to make sure that our hotels can return to serving the neighborhood. I mean, as a mom having a bar mitzvah this weekend, there's not a lot of choices in the neighborhood right now. So I really hope that we will have an eye toward bringing, that's Aviva. She's very excited to be on the community board call. She's listened to a lot of them. She knows all your names and she's supposed to go to bed. So I've made my point. I'm going to go put her to bed, but I appreciate you all. And I think this is a very important conversation. And I look forward to the time when our city can be fully revived and have enough hotel rooms for everyone. Right?
Aviva, congratulations on your brother's bar mitzvah. Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could just say something, because I listened to that webinar also. And what it was dealing with was hotels that were not modern, that did not have modern facilities, etc., that when they're talking now about hotels that are being built, they're talking about very often small boutique hotels, but ones that have modern facilities that have Wi-Fi, etc. And my understanding on the webinar is that it was basically old hotels that did not get tourists, etc.
Pablo, you had your hand up. Did you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with a lot of what Erica said and what Jeanette said as well. I would just like to add that, tourists won't stop coming just because we stop building hotels. And the big winner in all of that will be Airbnb. And we know that the problems that Airbnb causes with our housing stock, it'll take a lot of rent stabilized housing stock in particular offline. You already have a warehousing problem with rent stabilized housing stock. You're going to see more landlords opting to do shorter rentals, in many cases, illegal rentals that'll further them, not only take housing stock off the market, raise rents, but it'll also deprive us of revenue from the occupancy tax, potentially in the hundreds of millions of dollar range, particularly once you account for the fact that we've lost some hotels already. We may lose some more to the conversion programs, and the city will recover 5 years before the hotel stock will recover for the pre-COVID rate. So I just think this is horribly misguided, and we need to put the needs of our community for rent stabilized housing tenants ahead of the needs of hotel industry priorities. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to put it over until June, so everyone's going to have a chance to think about it and speak again. But Nabila, anything you can do to enlighten us would be very much appreciated.
I will follow up with additional information if available for some of these specific questions.
All right.
And I'll
Thank
just,
you.
I just want to take 1 minute to note that I'm actually going to be leaving city planning.
Oh, no.
And this is my last
Who approved that?
meeting.
Dare we ask where you're going?
Yeah, I'm not going far. I'm going to EDC, the Economic Development Corporation.
Okay, nice.
And I will, thank you. I will work on transitioning things and give you contact information. But I don't leave till the beginning of June. So I'm still around and we'll be following up. But this will be my last CB7 meeting. I can say after having worked on projects throughout Manhattan, CB7 is my favorite community board.
Ours too.
Yeah.
Nabila, I would
You're
have thought
one of our favorite planners.
I would have thought that you'd need a special permit from us to leave your position.
Touche.
Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Good luck, Nabila.
Mazel tov.
Good luck. Good luck.
Okay, so anything else?
No, we're on to our
Motion
next.
to adjourn.
Okay.
We have a little matter of a ULURP item.
Okay.
Okay.
So anybody, it's a free ranging discussion and we'll try to develop a resolution based on that. So anybody? Yes, Shelley.
I could be wrong, from the presentation
No.
we heard, that there won't likely be a accessible station at 110th Street because
Right.
you only need to have 2 stations away. So if you're at 110th Street, you have 96th Street, and you're going to have 125th Street. So it's unlikely that we're going to get what we've been looking for, which is improvements of accessibility, et cetera, on 110th Street. So I thought that was important for both discussions, but it disturbed me because it may be a fair way of doing things because you can travel, by other means of transportation to get to the stations that are accessible. But I think it's not serving our interests.
Thank you.
What?
If I could clarify, Shelley, you're saying that, in other words, we would be giving away density and the transit benefits we get would be minor and not an accessible station?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Mhm.
And as we learned in the last discussion, there's the potential for a bonus on a bonus without any significant advantage. And the bonus on the bonus is being given for a private developer undertaking what is essentially a public responsibility, and in an amount which is nowhere determined in the zoning resolution.
Right. There's something else that bothers me that was never completely explained, which is that a developer could have all the benefits, etc., but provide the whatever he would do. It's just not clear. Off-site. I did not understand the off-site provisions. This would be, could somebody who is building off-site, did anyone understand them much better than I did?
I didn't get that. I think there was a discussion about existing buildings and increasing the size
It's
of.
usually a get out, you know. Look, you don't have to put affordable here. You can put it anywhere within the
No, I
community.
know that's true for affordable housing. I just don't remember that being a function of this.
Let me look it up because
You may be right. I thought.
Sites within 500 degrees of a station can provide off-site improvements.
That means off-site, meaning within the station that's 500 degrees, that's 500 feet away. It doesn't mean that they can go.
I don't think so.
It means, yes, it means you could build a building, you could get the benefits on 108th Street, but do the improvements to the 110th Street entrance.
Right.
Well, but the easement is always within 500 feet. That's 2.5 blocks, so they could do that anyway.
No, the
So that's
easement is
not
a different.
off-site.
The easement is a different rule. The easement requires it to be within 50 feet.
500.
Well, I think that's for the improvement.
If you look at the map, it's 500, and also you can add 20 feet to a building based on the easement. Yeah, the transit improvement bonus is another issue, but they threw everything together.
Yeah.
They don't talk about a percentage increase there. They just say 2 stories for the easement.
That's because there's no FAR increase. What they're doing is they're somehow figuring out what FAR is lost and allowing the developer to stack it on. That's for the easement.
I don't think
It's
they
a
do.
different story for the improvement. They're two separate, completely separate things.
Absolutely. And they keep getting kind of squished together. But I don't think so, because there's no equivalency between the amount of space that would be taken for the easement and that percentage of space that would be added in height. They're just saying you could have 2 stories.
No,
I
the
think so.
FAR still
I
applies.
will go back and look and read it again.
I'm pretty sure what they do is, I don't know how they do it, but they figure out what FAR is compromised by the easement. And they allow you to put it somewhere else in the building up to 10 or 20 feet in height. Mark?
Not sure. Okay.
Thanks. So to move, I have first a recap and then a thought about moving us toward a resolution, since I think we need one to come out of this meeting tonight in order to have something to vote on at full board. So my understanding, and I'll frame it in the form of a question, is it correct that our options are approve, disapprove, approve with conditions, or disapprove with modifications? Those are the 4 basic things that we can do in a resolution. Richard very helpfully mapped out various concerns that might inform that resolution. I'm not going to, I don't think it should be a straight approval for sure. It's probably not in our interest to have a straight disapproval. So it's one of the 2 in the middle. one of the things that picking up on what I just heard, that I believe strongly is that, and it's premised on this issue. The issue is that we are selling a long-term asset for a short-term solution. You can only sell this FAR in effect once. And Richard makes a very good point about, is it appropriate to, in effect, sell these, to sell this bonus? And that's a perfectly valid land use value judgment, if you will. For me, the only time that I would think that it's appropriate to trade FAR or in terms of for this kind of short-term benefit would be for accessibility. I think that even though, we take a look at the recent example under Central Park West on the B and C line, where we had some very handsome improvements to stations, but no accessibility was included in any of them. And they have a short shelf life, 20, 30 years, and they'll be needing to renovate those stations again. And they'll be needing to renovate it without the benefit of an FAR bonus to incentivize somebody. So unless we're gonna give them another bonus on top of another bonus, we're gonna quick run out of stuff to sell to solve a short-term problem. So I would very much suggest that our resolution say that distinguish between station improvements that include accessibility and those that don't. And then I would suggest that we say something to the effect of being concerned about selling a short-term asset for a long-term gain. Those are my thoughts in addition to what Richard very helpfully put out in his comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes.
Paige. And then Ethel.
Very quickly, I think this is a great plan because we do a lot of work. My practice does a lot of work with the MTA in making these stations accessible. But there's no guarantee that those stations that aren't improved won't be improved in the future. And the question is, what they're trying to do is tuck in the elevators and the stairways inside a shelter rather than going into the track itself, because you know how congested it gets, and people with bicycles and a cat in a box and all sorts of things. And I'm worried. One of the things that I'd like our statement to state, and I don't know the wordsmithing of it, but is to plan for accessibility for every station. And I don't think maybe you start off with an easement, because I take your point. After 30 years, when they have to replace the elevator again, or fix the stairs, or put some other lighting in there, who's going to pay for it then? So I think we just need to put in things that we know we can ask for again in the future, that this is a new easement that should be renewable and can be perpetuated so that all stations get the handicapped access. I think that would be fairer, but I don't know how to do it. So
you can do it.
You guys.
It can be done. Ethel.
Well, these are clearly very important points. And I think we have to say that there are couple of other things in what Richard wrote, and maybe I wasn't always understanding them, but it seemed to me that they're worthwhile. One, getting to some of the other process points, there were several places in which approval could occur only by approval from the chair of the commission, and there were others, and there were several places where I thought that it would be important and beneficial to at least broaden the process a little and to have consultation or a limited period of time with the community board, of which there is precedent. So these are a process point, but I think very, very important. And I think Richard began to do very good work with it, but certainly we should include that in very clear ways. The second thing, and I beg your pardon, it may be my confusions, but sometimes as I was reading it, there seemed to be some possibilities of so-called voluntary improvements in which they didn't get the bonus. And if I'm not mistaken, sometimes, I mean, what's that category? Was that about so-called beautification? And what's
Yeah.
that?
Underlying everybody's discussion here tonight is that we have to distinguish between that provision of the resolution of the proposal that deals with easements and that
Yeah.
provision that deals with bonus.
Right,
As
right.
I understand and you know, and I'm basing it on the presentation that was made to us. With respect to the easement, it is not voluntary.
Yeah.
The MTA will tell a developer, the developer is required to consult with the MTA before getting a building permit. And the MTA will tell the developer whether it requires an easement, and if so, what size. If it requires an easement, without any going to any, you know, to the chair or to anyone else at city planning, much less a community board, if it requires an easement, the developer can shift FAR from the portion of his property that encompasses the easement and can add it on anywhere he wants, including the top of the building up to 10 feet and in certain circumstances, 20 feet. It also exempts the owner from certain streetscape requirements and curb cut requirements. So it is you know, but it's a mandatory thing. It's not a bonus, and nobody in the city other than the MTA gets to decide whether it would be applied. If the MTA says, yeah, we need an easement, because why shouldn't they? Okay, they're not concerned with zoning. They say we need an easement. All right, so the developer gets to put his FAR somewhere else, and in addition, he gets to put in retail in the space covered by the easement until the MTA decides that they need the easement, which could be never.
Richard, if I can add to that, because I've actually had some of my past work negotiations with the MTA regarding station improvements on development sites, is the MTA is state, it doesn't need to follow zoning. And it can take that land by eminent domain, and this zoning doesn't change. It's still, the MTA still has to pay for that land. So the only thing that we're doing here is we're giving the developer more flexibility in easements and less restrictions.
Right.
And so I think we're all in favor of the MTA taking an easement, tucking the stairs in, or putting in an elevator, or you know, as needed for the subway. But there's no nuance. The developer isn't giving anything up here. They're just gaining. And so I think if you want the developer to gain to this effort, I mean, they're going to get money for the easement that the MTA takes. So I think, I'm not sure if, I guess I understand the ideas of this, but I'm not sure if I'm not completely against the whole thing that Mark was saying, like maybe one of our choices is that we reject the whole thing. I have a number of issues. Maybe if we tighten it up, so it's really, I mean, the MTA's biggest issues are that they don't want to maintain elevators and they don't want to maintain escalators, and they're no good at doing that. And so if they can make, you know, maintenance agreements with private developers and there's some kind of trade-off, that's usually what they try to do. But often in the recent past, there's not enough incentive for a private developer to build an elevator or build an escalator for the MTA unless it really was already in the plan to begin with.
Peter?
I want to add something here that I think is important. We have, for the first time in maybe 20 or 30 years, substantial commercial property that is sitting fallow. And the MTA needs to go around and literally buy up property quickly right now for future access, elevators, escalators, and the like. You go up and down Broadway or Amsterdam or Columbus, and there's 30% of empty retail around. So this is an opportunity that may not reappear for quite a while. So I think.
How does that impact, what's that got to do with this proposal?
What?
What is that, suppose the MTA wants to buy up property, why does that have any?
Well, I mean, I said this once before, 86th Street should have had a escalator or elevator years ago. We did a large building between 87th and 88th Street, and the MTA could have very easily put an elevator in there, but they didn't want to do it at that point. They've resisted this because they have to maintain it. But if they work out agreements with private companies to maintain it, you know, it just hasn't happened. How many, there's one elevator at 96, there's another one at 72nd, nothing in between, and nothing further north or not much further south either. So the MTA needs to be encouraged, and they don't understand maybe the retail aspect of it right now, that there's a substantial amount of retail that's available.
Louisa.
Okay. I have several issues. One of the main things they want to do is increase developer participation. And this is by making this extremely generous. It's not just for elevators, it's also for substations, corridor improvements, space configurations, and station beautification, such as happened on Central Park West, which really didn't benefit us. I think that it has to be narrowed down to station ADA accessibility, which is basically elevators, and that we do not want to give away the store for beautiful stations, no matter how much we would appreciate them. Another issue I have is the easement. I think, Richard, you mentioned the chairman's cert. A chair cert is a non-discretionary action in which the chair is only saying they have done this, they have met this, and telling the DOB they can go ahead. There is no involvement, no review.
Right.
That's not what the people told us. As I recall,
it's in the text.
As I recall, the bonus, the award of the 20% bonus was subject to approval by the chair.
Okay,
and,
if I can,
yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. The thing is, the transit improvement bonus is an authorization.
Right.
Yes, and the authorization is discretionary by the commission.
Okay, all right, so you're talking about the easement.
It goes before us.
Right.
That's all. It doesn't have an EAS attached to it.
Right.
Doesn't have the complete ULURP review. And the only place that a ULURP comes into it is that if they get the 20% bonus and they want more FAR, which is not specified as to how much more they would want, that would be a special permit.
Yeah.
With very vague findings again.
Yeah, I mean, has everybody looked at the findings?
Vague. I don't have them in front of me.
I can read them.
I don't think we should do anything by a cert. We have no input at all with a cert, and these easements actually will affect us a great deal. Because when they say 500 feet, that's 2.5 blocks. So if you looked at the maps that were contained, it covers quite an area. So I would think at the least an authorization going into special permit. I know they want to speed up the process, but it hurts us to do so. And sometimes you need that time to know all of the impacts that projects such as this would have. So I would say no certs. It can only be for elevators. And we consider maybe the special permit for that 20% bonus. And I'm sorry, one other thing, I'm so sorry, but the stacking is something I think that we should address, because it comes out to almost a 40% increase in FAR, which is huge.
Comes out to a 44% increase.
Okay, you did the math.
Goes to 14.4 from R10. Goes to
So-
14.4, and there's no clear answer. I asked Connor, I haven't gotten an answer. In a contextual zone, how do you add FAR and still maintain the context? It just eliminates, I think it eliminates the context. Ethel,
I think it does also.
Yes. All right.
Now,
So
that's only when they're doing affordable, MIH with the accessibility. But it, as we saw in the previous
No,
presentation,
it would be
that's gonna
true
keep
even
coming up.
with a voluntary inclusionary housing. That gets tacked on to the 20% bonus, and you have a 4.4 bonus because it's 20 on 20.
Stacking is very unusual, by the way.
It used to be, I mean, when I started on the board 30 or 40 years ago, a 14.4 building was not unusual.
Not in this district, maybe in a central business district.
No, here.
Where?
On Broadway between, south of 72nd Street, white building.
Oh, yeah.
Anyhow, so let's, so what Louise is proposing, as I understand it, is that there be no bonus for improvements of a station, only for accessibility.
Right.
Also, that if there is an easement desired by the MTA, that it come before city planning and the community board for authorization. And that there shouldn't be stacking of bonus on bonus. Is that?
But so does that, I mean, if the state decides through eminent domain or whatever to take a corner of a building and use it as a subway entrance,
right,
they don't need to come before the community, before city planning.
That's
it's
true.
only if the developer decides that he wants to shift that
Right.
corner area and put it on his roof, that they would have to go before city planning.
Exactly. They
Yeah.
can do what they do now.
The other thing is, I don't know, we'll have to see what the infrastructure, the final language is of the bill from the federal government. But we don't want infrastructure money coming from the feds in this bill to be able to go to developers to develop their buildings with some small transportation improvement. Somebody in my planning colleagues was mentioning something about that. I don't have a lot of details, but something to keep in the back of mind.
One of the things that concerns me is that there really is we don't have any understanding of what kind of improvement would trigger a 20% bonus. If they put up, photographs in the station, is that enough? Or do they have to remodel the entire station? There are no criteria that I could find other than these vague findings as to what would entitle a developer to the 20% FAR bonus. To me, that's a fatal flaw.
Yeah, it's how much the MTA wants them to do it.
No, because the MTA,
because they'll give it to
they
them.
don't care.
They'll give it to them.
The MTA will take any amount of money and say, well, they should get a bonus, because the MTA is not concerned with what happens above ground. Okay, they're not concerned with how high the building is. All they're concerned about is a revenue source. And if the revenue source costs them nothing, they're going to take it. And that would be fine if the city planning commission and the community board had some meaningful input into it, but I don't see that. And I don't see any criteria. Paige.
And Doug, too.
Just quickly, listening to your argument, it's sort of like, why do we need this except for the handicapped access, which would be nice. But the other factors are, who's going to maintain it? What happens when it breaks down? All these are open corners. They're curb cuts, which means that in slushy weather or rain, water is going to back up on the sidewalk. There has to be other provisions because, transit is, I wish Andrew was here because he knows how they think and work, but they're very compartmentalized. And so I worry that, they're going to be kind of ordinary and utilitarian. They're not going to be inviting. When I'm on crutches and the next time I have my knee surgery or whatever, I'll be the only female in there and I'd be terrified. So I think there are other factors. It's not just about the developer's gain for, as Richard, as you say, that 20%, depending on the site, could be colossal and change all the hard work we've worked at in regulating. So I'm nervous.
Yeah.
Ethel.
Really, this
Doug
is
was
one,
next.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Doug.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Ethel.
Okay.
I mean, in all fairness, I'm not on the committee, but I continue to learn so much from everyone on this committee. I really, hats off. Manhattan, New York has always been the real estate deal, right? So this is when a developer is looking at this, they're going to look at return on investment. This is straightforward mathematics. They're going to say, what's my FAR bonus here? What can I sell this unit for or lease this unit for? And then project it over 10, 15, 20 year amortization. And when they figure out it might be an excellent deal. And I think what I'm concerned about is that this may be too good of a deal. And so I think, what does a station cost? I mean, that's what they're going to say. I have to put in X number $1 million and I get over 10 years, 50 million, 100 million. So, I think, Luis has mentioned it. It's very generous and maybe it's too generous. And also in just exactly what Mark said, which was that it seems like a short-term sort of asset, for a long-term gain. We don't get to resell that again. And, perhaps we can just really use a lot more leverage. And the question I have for the committee is that aside from improvements, if they're going to redo a new station, by definition, don't all new stations have to be ADA, period, end of story?
No.
Well,
Okay.
my understanding is that they do, but because they're all pre-existing, the MTA has a latitude. And so it's, physically, some of them really cannot be made handicap accessible very easily or comply with ADA. I believe that if a station is rebuilt and isn't just having cosmetic improvements, it's required to be rebuilt so that it's ADA accessible.
Right, like the difference between an Alt 1 and an Alt 2 permit on a DOB permit, if you're just doing cosmetic redo, you don't have to bring it up to current code. But if you're doing an Alt 1, everything comes up to code and you have to do everything ADA. Isn't the MTA bound by that too, or do they have certain?
They have more, I don't want to get sidetracked too far on this, but there are public works liberality that is not available to a private developer.
All All right. So yeah. So for me, the ADA is paramount to this. And
so-
maybe yeah. Thanks.
Just, yeah, one quick point and then trying to pull this together. I think, by the way, given what Doug also mentioned and others, that when previously the 110th Street station was discussed in the some months ago at the Board 9 thing, and that they wanted the handicap accessible, I believe Shelley might remember what was brought up was that, in fact, there were some things that no way could they make that 110th Street station on the southern side accessible, because there was a whole question of the tracks and all of that. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, they're saying that we need the development and we need the bonus. And then what I heard was, no, but it can't happen there. And I'm just saying that as a side note of the madness of what's been thrown out.
No, but Ethel, that implicates what Louise has been saying, which is that on that station, there would not be an easement because you can't have an accessible entrance.
Right.
But there might be an improvement, and that would give way to a bonus.
Possible, yes. And the improvement might be defined in a rather flexible and loose way. But may I just say, first of all, I just want to absolutely compliment all my colleagues here, because I think everybody has been so important and thoughtful and good in all of this, that I mean, I know something about this, but I feel as if I have learned a great deal from everybody tonight. And it seems to me, therefore, if we could do this, and that is, it seems to me, of the options that Marx sets out, which is sort of the outline, but it didn't begin to deal, of course, with all the nuances that you brought up. It seems that we can't simply approve, and that's we're not, because we've got too much to say. We don't want to disapprove completely, but many of the points that many were making tonight, which are completely good and terrific. I mean, Paige brought up some important points that have relevance for the future. I mean, I get educated. I think we have to do a little bit of an ambitious attempt here, and that is that we should describe that has merit. We would like to approve it. We can only approve, but in order to approve 1, 2, 3, 4, such as some of what has been said, the distinctions between, easement and so on, the difficulties with the lack of approvals, just going, just having an approval by the chair, do some of that. And then I think we need a page or two. I don't know, the lawyers, it's almost as if I'm looking for dicta, to say that this is a process that is commendable, finally, that New York is beginning to deal with this basic question of accessibility. But it's not being done with foresight and with enough recognition. And there's contradictions. We should be able to carry the flag on this. And Community Board 7, at least as I've been hearing it, has been extremely thoughtful and sophisticated. And we should make our specific points and then get to, wait a minute, if we want to improve the system, here's some of what MTA and city planning has to do, and not be in separate spheres. That's all. I'm doing it. I'm saying this from admiration.
Let me lay out a few points that everyone has made, and see if there's agreement or not on some of these, and then we can always craft. I can or Jeanette, we can craft
right
resolution after tonight. But let's get the points, and let's separate the easement provisions from the bonus provisions. Right? The easement provisions I think Louisa has said, and I agree with her, that it should not be an automatic transfer of FAR from one part of the building to another. It should be subject to authorization by the chair as a minimum. Is that Louisa? Is that, yeah?
Also, I think it should be proportional.
Well, it is proportional in theory there, you know, that the
If I
FAR
can find
stays
it, I'll
the
send
same.
to you.
You know, the FAR stays the same, but, you know.
And no harm in saying that, even if it's in there.
Yeah, right. And I think that as to the easement, we should say, we think as an abstract matter, it's a good idea. It's not, you know, we don't reject it, but we think that it requires some oversight because the MTA has no incentive not to go along with it. All right. As to the bonus provisions, people have mentioned the following. Louisa has said that she thinks it should be limited to accessibility. That is, you know, you get a bonus for putting in an elevator, an escalator, and agreeing to maintain it, but you don't get a bonus for painting the station or retiling. How do people feel about that? Seeing no objection, moving along.
Well,
Number two,
Richard,
yeah.
Richard, the only problem with that is Peter knows, because when we did 72nd Street Station, I did the above ground stuff and he did the new building. I don't know if Peter's still on, but transit has its own internal review system. It's a bit arcane and medieval, to put it bluntly. And they always throw out, oh, well, this is part of a greater network of railroad engineering, et cetera. So I think we want to tell them that we want to limit the amount of change because they spend a ton of money, you know, restoring all the historic tiles and new attenuation systems and where the middle of the train stops so that the guy can control the train from the middle. It's always impressed me that the conductor's and driving the train in the middle of the train. I don't know how whatever, but I think we should be very careful and just limit it to everything above ground, how it's maintained. And I love the idea of separating the easement from the other issues. I think that's very clear.
Yeah, and I think that we also should say that if that in any event, there should be monetary guidelines as to what a developer is expected to do in order to get a bonus. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
And there should be under no this is, to me, is the hardest one I'm about to say, is that there shouldn't be stacking of bonuses. And the problem with that, although I agree with it, is that it may discourage VIH, or it may discourage VIH, and it may mean that if there's mandatory inclusionary housing, there's no possibility of a bonus. But I still think, I mean, I can't get around the 44% increase in FAR.
Is there a middle ground, Richard? Is there some amount where you could have both bonuses, but one of them gets prorated because it's stacked on top of another? Or is it?
Maybe it can be divided by 2.
It's spoken like a true math teacher.
But you get the bigger of the 2, right? Yeah.
Well,
okay.
I don't know. I mean, it could be that you could provide for a more moderate contribution by the developer and a smaller bonus on top of it, you know.
At the end of the day, the MTA can always pay for taking property and turning it into a station. I mean, this is an incentive to privatize the development of making accessible or improved stations.
Yeah.
So I don't feel like we're eliminating all the options if we say they can't stack the bonuses.
Right. Okay, so that, I mean, any other points that we should be making? All right, let me, if you don't, nobody minds, I'll try to do a draft.
Yeah.
And circulate it in the next few days.
Why don't we have a vote on the major points so that we don't
Okay.
have to, so we have a vote for the full board?
Yeah, okay,
I
good
just
idea.
want to add one other thought, and I don't know, maybe Louisa or Paige or Ethel or somebody knows, but one of the biggest issues that the MTA has is maintenance of elevator, maintenance of escalators.
Right.
And that really wasn't discussed in this, but to me, that's where, like, it would be worth more of giving a bonus if you really had, you know, something well maintained, so it wasn't broken right after it was built. And I was just wondering if that's something to say.
You should be aware that transit, if Andrew were here, he'd tell you the more facts, and maybe Shelley, you know, having worked with Andrew more, but they have their own elevator division and their own escalator division. They are an island unto themselves. They'll give you a plot plan and they'll tell you where the stair is going, and then everything else is done.
But Paige, they told me in a project 2 years ago that they absolutely will not build outdoor elevators or escalators. That they only have like 2 or 3 in the station, in the system, and they won't build anymore. So the only way that those can be built is if a private developer does it.
Well, I think this goes to planning. Why can't they plan to take sites where you can put a little corner elevator in? I just think it's Machiavellian in terms of turning a real civilian necessity, and yet who's going to benefit? Okay, the person using the unit, but the developer is going to get something else, and it's I don't know. I'm very mixed about this, because I think if transit, and again, it's a question for Andrew. Richard, I'd run it by some of these things by Andrew, because he knows the way it works, or Shelley. You may weigh in.
What I do know is that the only time we've had guarantees of effective escalators and elevators is when the private developer or corporation continues with the responsibility to have it maintained and operated.
Okay.
I can give you a whole bunch of examples where the MTA has and where this regular.
I think Paige, I think if nobody objects, I'm going to send a copy of our draft to Andrew to get his reaction.
Absolutely.
Sure.
We look forward to it.
Motion. Let's vote on.
With anticipation, we look forward and joy. Yes.
Is Seema on? Seema, are you on?
I believe.
Oh. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, because
sorry,
I don't want to worry about a quorum. Okay, all those in favor of this general proposition? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And if I vote twice, it's 8.
Richard, can we define the general proposition?
Yes.
Always a troublemaker.
With respect to the easements, the configuration of the FAR in the building that's being added to replace the easement should be subject to an authorization by city planning and review by the community board. With respect to the bonuses, the bonus provision should be limited to creating an accessible entrance to the station and or agreeing to maintain the accessible entrance to the station.
Can't they be combined?
Yeah, and or that there should not be.
Why not make it and?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there
Fine.
might be some cases where it already exists, but it's been
Yeah.
defunct for 10 years.
So, and where it doesn't previously exist.
Okay.
All right, so you have a +1 from me.
That if there is to be a bonus, there should be more express monetary equivalences set forth in the resolution, so that there's not a debate about how much a developer has to do in order to get the bonus. And there should be.
So that would be guidelines for payments.
Findings. I don't know what I couldn't even begin to draft one, but there should be something there.
Yeah.
And then finally, there should not be any layering of bonuses on top of bonuses. And if there are, certainly should not be 20 on 20 or 20 on 25.
Can you also ask Andrew, what happens if during that 30-year cycle, the property is sold? What is the mechanism there to enforce the successor purchaser to?
I don't know if Andrew would know that, but I'm pretty sure it would go with the land. It would go with the.
It would go with the land? Okay.
I mean, that would be my supposition, but I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would take the form of
Just by
like a
in
restricted.
perpetuity.
Yeah, restricted covenant. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Okay, all right,
So
good.
you got my vote.
Okay.
Okay, so let's try it again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right, non-committee members. Dos. Any opposed? Any abstaining?
Richie, your older brother, we're not sure where he's at.
How do you know he's older?
You said he was.
I said.
Oh.
We're a few years apart. I didn't say who was older.
Okay.
So anyhow, this worked out well. I think we put in a fair amount of effort in this.
Sure.
Yes.
Are there any comments from the public?
Oh, is anyone here? Okay.
But your brother's still in the dark.
Yeah.
About the whole thing.
All right. So I'll try to circulate something in the next.
Yeah, there were no hands raised on any of this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Have a good dinner, everyone.
Wait, we're not
I'm
done.
eager
Wait, we have new business.
We have two new business items where people requested to speak.
Okay.
50 West 69th Street. Do we have?
Cannot be handled in a group.
Who's?
Sarah.
Yeah.
Mark, just add her.
On her way.
Okay.
Kara, you're up.
I am up, and I have Marie-Therese Pope is also here. So when Jeanette told me you guys had a packed meeting, she wasn't lying. So thank you all. So we want to thank you again for your intervention and help with the problem with the after-hours variances at 50 West 69th Street. Your inquiries, the letter, Rosenthal's office, since then, there have been no permits issued for Saturday construction, and we're of course going to keep an eye on it. But we wanted to thank you again, and this time I can speak on behalf of the block associations, the Block Association for West 69th and West 68th. Got together, approved circulating and supporting the petition, which you all have suggested. We had a great response for it. Took very little to get folks to sign this petition. So we had 376 residents of West 68th and 69th sign it. And while we were out collecting signatures, folks from different blocks who kind of knew what we've been going through really wanted to sign it. So we created a supporters petition, and we had 190 of those folks who don't live on our blocks, but wanted to show their support for us just against, those abuses of those permits. So it was really great. I sent copies of it earlier today to Richard and Jeanette. I also, if you want me to share my screen, I have it queued up. You know, circulating this petition, we literally spoke to hundreds of people on our street and on 68th Street. And, you know, people were so anxious to do something, you know, to do something they thought would help with this problem. You know, there was, you know, people were like, oh yes, will it help? I'll sign it. So it was good. The petition was good. If people felt like they could do something, but in all of these conversations we had over the course of a couple of weekends, you know, the frustration is still there. Issues came out. The block associations have noted them, and we're going to do what we can to try to tackle as many as we are able to fix. So we may be back asking for help. But the big issues that, you know, people are still, it's the noise, it's the lack of noise abatement, it's the pollution, fumes, the vibration. And, you know, generally, you know, what the thing we heard again and again and again and again, because people are so frustrated because they feel powerless against this, was how did the city ever approve this? Why did the city ever approve this? And, you know, like, how can a house for just 2 people be allowed to make so many people miserable for so long? So, you know, we may be back in the coming months if some of these other issues like traffic backed up and no noise abatement around machineries, if we can't, you know, get the owners to, or DOB to help us, we may be back again to ask for your assistance. But again, thank you.
Now, one thing I'm sure you're aware that frequently when there's new development in our community, the community board facilitates the creation of a council of neighbors and the developer to oversee, not oversee, but to you know, to make the developer aware of construction issues, see if they can be resolved. And it's proven to be a reasonably effective technique. It doesn't work with every developer, but it's something you may want to think about.
You know,
I just want to compliment you for getting that petition. I know it took, I know you said it didn't take a lot of work, but I'm sure it did.
Well, it didn't take a lot of persuading of anyone. Right. It was a matter of us just really standing out on the street, you know, on the weekends and talking to people.
Well, I would like to, you know, with over 500 signatures and this being election season, I would suggest that you just officially present it to the community board and a copy to the elected officials at our next full board meeting where the public has a chance to stand up and talk about any issue.
Oh, okay, great.
Just so it's on record.
Mm-hmm. We will do that.
Thank you, and thank you for waiting.
Actually, I know you asked that as a rhetorical question of how did the city allow it. I think it's an interesting point, and I'm sure everyone else on the committee could speak to it far better than I can. And I think it's a question worth answering. In my limited ability to answer it, it's a question of if a building can be developed as of right, which means that it's not landmarked and it's not, there's not height limits, there's very little that can be done to stop construction. And even if it's landmarked, it's only specific things that can be stopped. And the city overall just has, and the city government has just a very strong developer-friendly attitude. So the idea of noise abatement, you know, as we talked about a few months ago, the DOB will just give out after-hours variance like candy, and they don't care unless neighbors complain. And once you start asking and saying, like, why did you give this out for reasons of public safety? What is the public safety issue? They won't answer it. They won't even give you the materials if you file a freedom of information request, but they'll just magically stop giving out those after hours variances. And I'm sure everyone else on the committee could give much better explanations of why the city allows it. But, you know, in my mind, it's just a strong pro-developer viewpoint. And it's just incredibly, incredibly difficult to stop things unless there's a specific legal reason, such as if it's, you know, a very important landmark to stop construction.
So I just have a question. I brought this up a lot. Hi, I'm Marie Therese. Nice to see all of you. And thank you for listening to us. I really appreciate all your help. And it's been nice to have weekends without vibration and a lot of sound. So I appreciate your help in this. Thank you so much. I just want to see something positive come out of this interminable construction project that is just so affecting everyone's life and quality of life on 68th Street, on 69th Street, even on 70th Street. And I just don't understand how you're saying there's no laws. Well, maybe there should be a law that, you know, before anything gets approved, and I'm not sure if it's you or somebody else, that there's full disclosure of the scope of the work, how long it's going to take. This has been going on since 2017 and it's nowhere near finished. Noise reduction, vibration reduction, pollution, and also, you know, outreach to the block associations, because see what the block association just did, like everybody mobilizes, which is a really amazing thing and protects the neighbors and tenants. They're really great about informing us and protecting us. So I just, like I said the last time, would love to see maybe a committee put together of an architect, a contractor, you know, and somebody who would say the quality of life, well, they're going to hear noise for 7 years straight, vibration. There are going to be people who have damaged hearing and they're going to be inhaling fumes for 7 years. Maybe we shouldn't approve these iceberg buildings. So I don't know how to get that to happen, or if that happens somewhere after it passes through you. Can somebody elucidate me on how that would happen?
Community board is just an advisory vehicle for giving community input into certain city laws that the charter outlines. We don't have any sort of authority to change laws other than the same way a private citizen does. It's, I think, going through your elected officials, local elected officials, is more of a vehicle for that. We're here to support you and to raise issues and a conduit between government and the residents, but we don't. I mean, this is an unusual case, and I don't think people anticipated somebody taking 2 townhouses and creating a McMansion deep down into the rocks and everything, and it's most unfortunate. But I would think just, and this isn't like an official recommendation or anything, but from my experience, you have people running for a local elected office. This is the time to get it in their radar, you know.
Do they have the power to make a law, though?
The city council has the power to change laws, create new laws that then, you know, go into the city charter.
Okay, I don't know. So
I mean,
what? I'm sorry, pardon me?
And the mayor, you know.
To Jeanette's point and to Richard's point, by the way, this is in a landmark district, and Community Board 7 did recommend disapproval of this project, including for some of the reasons that have now been borne out. But LPC let it go through, and we can all speculate as to why. By the way, with respect to vibrations and so forth, this is something that you might want to follow up with DOB on, because, and Paige, I'm looking at you because you'll get it better than me, but there are enhanced requirements with respect to protecting neighboring structures with respect to the building code when you do demolition in an historic district or adjacent to a landmark structure. If they aren't following those requirements, then there's actions that DOB should be taking in that regard. But that's a complaint-driven process. DOB doesn't inspect unless you ask them to.
We've had them come out, though. The problem is they come out. Kara, do you want to speak to this?
Well, I mean, this is a bigger problem for them. Is you file a complaint, and obviously like I filed Saturday complaints, and they come check it out on Monday. you know? So there,
Right,
if anything could change out of this, that would be it.
Or they come
Been
check it
there,
out.
done that, yeah.
Yeah.
To Mark's point, I think the other thing you can do is write a nice note to the legal counsel, Mark Silverman and John Weiss, and inform him that you're concerned about your properties, because vibration isn't just the party walls. It affects the street, the sidewalk, the trees, the dogs. They hear more than anything else, and let them know that you want protection for your building, because you can't guarantee that what they're doing won't have an impact on your property later on. I mean, it could be something as simple as a high gust of wind suddenly loosens that piece of flashing on your roof that you thought you'd had repaired. Buildings have a way of disintegrating when they're not looked after. Also, to Mark's point, you have to have a site safety officer on board. They must be trained now. You cannot work on a building these days without that. And this has been a huge project. I forgot it started in 2017. And I would call the DOB and tell them that the guy's not doing his job. You know,
that's actually why they got their last stop work permit for 2 weeks, was because they didn't have like the alternate safety officer trained.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, so you know that. And I just keep bugging them until they get bored with it, and then they're gonna shut them down. Nobody wants that, but it's a safety issue. And it's you live there. I think everything that Mark said is right, but put it in writing and copy it to both the Commissioner of Buildings and also the legal side of the Landmarks Commission, because they need to know this.
I'm taking my notes here.
It's John Weiss and Mark Silberman.
Okay,
and they're starting back to work, so that he'll get it.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Doug?
Yeah, aren't there requirements during demolition? I've seen them where they're indicators that are put onto the adjacent buildings that show movement and vibration. They're almost like, I would say seismometers, but
they're called telltales, and they've got a crosshair.
Yes.
And you have to have these every certain amount of whatever. When we did the Corbin building and we propped up and dug a hole for the escalator, we had seismometers and somebody 24/7 while we were excavating and changing all of the power lines and getting the new track in. That building had such loving care. It was wonderful, but it's expensive. And maybe this is something also that John Weiss and Mark should be informed about, and saying that where is the monitoring system, not only for the construction site, but you have to do it. And Mark, I forget what the distance is, but it's a certain number of feet away. I think it's 100 feet, if I'm not right.
Sounds right.
I just put it in chat. I believe it's 90 feet.
Is it 90 feet? Yeah.
And Kara, you might want to copy what I put in chat, but the DOB has a technical policy and procedure notice 1088, which says that prior to work commencing in a landmark district, there are requirements to avoid damage to adjacent historic structures. And that memo, that DOB memo, specified those sensor devices that we just mentioned.
The other thing you can do is talk to the New York State Preservation Office, because they have a compliance unit for potential damage to landmarks, and I would reach out to them. Can we have a new district manager? Can I give the information to her? June
1st.
Right.
June 1? Oh, okay. Well, wait till June 1 and then call the office, or June 2nd and then call the office, and I'll find out who it is, because they have a safety officer, as does the Department of Buildings, believe it or not. They have one man brilliant. He's there. He's the doctor for the preservation community. He's terrific.
Yeah.
But
We just, some of this information I wish I had a year ago when they were still excavating and the vibrations were insane. They've actually now to the point where they've probably finished pouring the basement and are erecting, I-beams and so forth. But we thought once excavation would be over, it would be like a little better. And it's just different. It's different noise, different vibrations. So we appreciate these suggestions.
And Kara, back to your rhetorical question. One other issue is, it all comes down to money. And for developers, there's just a massive amount of money in favor of construction. And there are organizations like REBNY that are advocating and helping candidates who are pro-construction.
Yeah.
There's no money in trying to stop construction. And so you've got groups that support all developers. However, if any one construction project is upsetting neighbors, that's a very individual thing. So you have your issue. I personally had one right next door to me that was a major issue. Any number of other people have had their specific issue, but there's just the effort that you've put in for your one issue is a massive amount of effort. The idea of forming a coalition to help other people, it's a good idea, but there's no money behind it. And the amount of effort it would take is tremendous. And I see one of the attendees, I'm not sure if he's still on, Chris Giordano, was dealing with it on his block, but there's just there's no movement of gathering all people with unique issues to band together to try to pass legislation with a city council that's largely supported by real estate dollars. And get it signed by a mayor who, the mayors are often supported by real estate dollars. It's an uphill battle because the money's against us and the effort is, monumental even to fight one project, but to have a coalition fighting multiple projects has never happened.
Well, with that, let's go to our second new business item, 36 West 66th Street, 3 blocks south. And is that Chris who was going to speak on that?
Okay, thank you all so much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, good luck.
I look, I don't know if Chris is going to, I sort of discouraged him because I said it was a long meeting.
So as long as nobody's here, could you?
Yes, he is. He's here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you can allow him to speak.
Yep.
You should be able to unmute now.
I don't want to make this meeting longer for you than it already has been. And the community board many months ago had already taken a look at this issue. As you know, we're about nearly 2 years since the 36 West 66th Street site has been dormant. The neighbors are very nervous about the construction crane that is still on the site. The neighbors are also very upset about the sidewalks and streets on 65 and 66 between Central Park West and Columbus Avenue that are still blocked because of the site. It seems that, so what we heard, and when Mark was chair, he came out and looked, and some letters were written, and the feedback we got at the time, well, DOB keeps giving them their permits, and so when they have active permits, even if they're not working, there's nothing you can do to restore the site or cause the site to be restored and the crane taken away. But now it turns out that the crane permit expired. So we thought, oh, let's see if we can push back again. So that's what this is about. It doesn't feel right that a developer who's not actively working, who's got multiple challenges, should be able to leave the community, imperiled this way. So we're looking for some guidance. I understand that it's probably that the DOB is going to issue a permit imminently and that COVID has slowed everything down and that those are probably the reasons, but any guidance we can get would be appreciated.
And my understanding is that we wrote a previous letter, but at that point, there were still permits for the crane on site, so that we could write a new letter saying there's no permits for this crane and it's still sitting on site, not being maintained.
Yeah, and further context is, you know, when one of the first challenge went to the state Supreme Court, the judge voided the permits, but then Extel appealed, and I guess on appeal, a permit cannot be voided. I think that was the explanation.
I looked at the city's site, and it's a little ambiguous as to whether they have or don't have a permit. There's an indication that there's an inspection scheduled for sometime in June, and I think that the temporary permit was extended until then. So before we write anything, I think we need to clear that up, because it may well be that they're technically within their rights. Doesn't mean we shouldn't write anything, but we should at least know what the facts are.
And I was relative to the previous discussion about West 69th Street, it's occurred to me over these years that there might be some legislation that should be looked at, and we would appreciate some guidance on this. For example, the task force meetings that you all, the community board, helps organize, they're not mandated, and Extel did one or two of them with us, and then they stopped, and they weren't interested in having a conversation with the community, and they went through the motions a couple of times, and then that was it.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that maybe that should be required, and maybe there needs to be a law that requires it.
It's, if you have to require a developer to do that, it's not going to be of any value. It only works if a developer is somewhat motivated to qualify or appease the community, or is of a kind heart. But if a developer doesn't want to cooperate, no law is going to have any impact, I don't think.
Well, maybe that's the wrong example, but if there's some approach to legislation that could keep these folks accountable, as you pointed out, we are in an election year, and we can put some pressure. That would be great.
Can I also offer? I happen to be around your neighborhood, Chris, and the gantry for window washing was fully deployed, and it covers pretty much the width of Amsterdam Avenue. And later on in the afternoon, I looked back from 88th Street, and it was still deployed. I think there's got to be, I agree with you, Chris, there has to be some way that people, because there was no sign below, don't walk under here kind of thing. And a ladder that you buy in a hardware store has more safety labels on it than what we experience walking through the city streets. So I would put that one on your list. I think Olive would appreciate that too, because I think it really is, the city with these super tall buildings is going to change the way we use our streets. But I was surprised that it was fully deployed and cantilevering out across the entire avenue, and you didn't see it unless you were for 10, 15 blocks away. So add that to your list, Chris, if you would, okay? And call Olive, tell her we were thinking of her, okay?
Will do.
All right.
All right.
Thanks
Thank
very
you all
much
for this attention, and I'm sorry to keep you a few minutes late.
No.
Thanks, Chris. You're doing God's work, or I don't know if that's the right expression. But,
Well, you all are doing it. Thank you so much.
But everybody on the committee has been very impressed with the work you've done.
Thanks so much.
I know you have a lot of good help.
Yeah, I get late.
Requires somebody to put it all together.
You have some angels working.
I get advice from the teenagers in the home.
Both of them are very bright.
Wait till your teenagers are 39 and 47. See what kind of advice you get.
That'll be interesting. Yes.
So guys, I know it's late, but I just have 4 quick things for new business.
Four.
Just kidding. Motion to adjourn.
Oh, seconded.
Thank you,
I'm going to
everybody.
abstain for cause.
Richard,
Objection.
Richard, I just have to say that I am going to be out of town for my son's graduation from college. So I will not be at the full board to present.
Mazel
the-
tov.
I'm just
So
getting off,
you will have to
getting
present
off my
Right.
resolution.
3 hour.
Well, wait a minute. Why can't you do a Zoom from wherever you are?
I'm not confident. So he graduates on the weekend and then we're going to a cabin like up by
Oh, all right.
Duluth or something for a couple
Right.
days. So
Okay.
I can't
Nice.
guarantee it.
Well, have fun.
All right.
Congratulations.
We'll muddle through.
Yes, we always do. Thank you. Good
Enjoy.
night, everybody.